You are closer to this knowledge than you think, not because someone chose you, not because you were initiated into a secret order, but because the doorway to it has always existed inside your own awareness. Yet most people walk past that doorway every day without ever realizing it is there. They look outward for answers, searching for power in circumstances, in people, in opportunities, in luck. But the deeper truth, the one that has echoed through ancient teachings for centuries, begins with a realization that changes everything. The world you experience is not the source of your life. It is the reflection of it. When people speak about something called the 33rd degree, they often imagine a mysterious hierarchy, a hidden level of spiritual authority reserved for a few. But the true meaning of this idea is far simpler and far more profound. It represents a threshold of awareness, a moment when the human mind stops identifying itself as a passive observer of reality and begins to recognize its role as a participant in creation. Standing at this threshold means something important has begun to shift inside you. The questions you ask become different. The way you look at life becomes different. You start to sense that reality may not be as rigid as it once appeared. Think about your own life for a moment. Every day you move through a world filled with objects, events, and people that seem solid and independent of your thoughts. It feels as though life is happening to you. Circumstances arise, opportunities appear or disappear, and you respond to them as best you can. Most of us are taught to believe that the outside world is the cause, and we are the effect. We are taught to adjust ourselves to what is happening around us. But what if that assumption is reversed? What if the outside world is actually responding to something deeper inside you? This is where the threshold begins to reveal itself. The moment you consider the possibility that your inner state may be influencing your outer world, you have already stepped beyond the ordinary view of reality. You begin to see that consciousness may not simply be something that observes life. Consciousness may be the very field through which life organizes itself. Imagine standing before a mirror. Whatever expression you make, the mirror reflects it instantly. If you smile, the reflection smiles. If you frown, the reflection frowns. You would never expect the mirror to change first. You understand that the reflection follows the one who stands before it. Now consider the possibility that the world around you functions in a similar way. Your inner assumptions, your expectations, the emotional tone you carry within you, these may be shaping the reflection you experience as life. At first, this idea may seem difficult to accept, because it challenges a deeply ingrained belief. Most people believe that thoughts are weak and circumstances are powerful. They believe that the external world dictates what they must feel and think. But the deeper traditions of spiritual philosophy have always suggested the opposite. They teach that consciousness is not a byproduct of reality. Consciousness is the foundation of it. The threshold of this knowledge is not crossed through belief alone. It begins with observation. You start to notice patterns in your own life. Certain expectations seem to repeat themselves in your experiences. Certain emotional states seem to attract similar situations again and again. You may recall moments when you strongly imagined something, and somehow events unfolded in a way that matched that inner image. These moments often appear subtle, almost coincidental, but over time they begin to form a pattern that is difficult to ignore. What ancient teachers tried to explain through symbols, numbers, and allegories was this: the human mind is not separate from the creative intelligence of the universe. It is a localized expression of it. The same awareness that perceives the stars, the oceans, and the movements of nature is also present within your own consciousness. When you begin to understand this, your relationship with reality changes in a quiet but profound way. You no longer see yourself as a small figure trying to survive in a vast and unpredictable world. Instead, you begin to sense that you are participating in a larger field of creation. Your thoughts, feelings, and assumptions are not isolated mental events. They are movements within that field. This is why many spiritual traditions speak about awareness as a kind of gateway. The gateway does not open outward into a secret chamber somewhere in the world. It opens inward. When you pass through it, you begin to see life from a different vantage point. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you become curious about the state of mind that preceded them. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking a more powerful question. What inner pattern might be expressing itself through this experience? Standing at this threshold does not mean you have mastered anything yet. It simply means you have begun to see the outline of a deeper truth. You have noticed that your inner world may be more significant than you once believed. And once that realization appears, it becomes difficult to return to the old perspective completely. Many people reach this point briefly and then turn away, returning to familiar explanations of life, but some remain curious. They continue exploring the connection between their inner state and the world around them. Over time, they discover that awareness itself holds a quiet power, not the kind of power that forces events to happen, but the kind that shapes the patterns through which events unfold. The threshold of 33rd degree knowledge is not marked by a ceremony, title, or a secret document. It is marked by a shift in perception. It is the moment when you begin to understand that the most important force shaping your life may not be outside you at all. It may be the awareness through which you experience everything, and the moment you truly begin to see that, you realize you have already taken the first step beyond the ordinary understanding of reality. Now that you have stepped closer to the threshold of this deeper understanding, something else begins to reveal itself, something subtle, yet incredibly powerful. If consciousness truly shapes reality, then every thought you hold must carry a form, a structure, a pattern. Thoughts are not random sparks that disappear into nothingness. They are more like blueprints, invisible designs that quietly organize the experiences you later encounter in the physical world. This is where an ancient idea begins to make sense, an idea that many traditions have tried to express through the language of sacred geometry. You may have seen images of geometric patterns that repeat across nature: the spiral of a seashell, the branching of a tree, the symmetry of a snowflake, the arrangement of petals in a flower. These patterns appear again and again across the universe, from microscopic life to the vast structure of galaxies. For centuries, philosophers and mystics have suggested that these patterns are not merely decorative accidents of nature. They are expressions of an underlying order, a silent architecture through which the universe organizes itself. But here is the question most people never ask. If the universe is structured through patterns, what role does the human mind play within that structure? Consider this carefully. Every building begins with a design long before it becomes a physical structure. An architect does not simply place bricks randomly until a house appears. The structure exists first as a plan within the mind. Lines are drawn, proportions are calculated, relationships between spaces are defined. Only after the design is complete does the physical form emerge. In a similar way, the experiences you call your life may also follow designs that originate within consciousness itself. Your thoughts form patterns. Your emotions energize those patterns. Over time, these patterns influence the direction in which events unfold. Most people assume that thinking is a passive activity. Thoughts appear, disappear, and are often ignored. But what if thinking is more like shaping a field? What if each sustained idea organizes energy in the same way a magnet organizes iron filings into visible lines of structure? When you hold a thought repeatedly, especially when it is combined with strong emotion, that thought begins to establish a kind of internal geometry. Not a geometry made of lines and angles on paper, but a geometry of expectation, belief, and attention. And just like the patterns found in nature, these internal structures tend to reproduce themselves in the world you experience. Imagine dropping a stone into still water. The moment the stone touches the surface, ripples begin spreading outward in perfect circles. The water does not need instructions. The pattern emerges naturally from the disturbance. Your thoughts can function in a similar way. A single idea, if held with enough clarity and emotional intensity, sends subtle ripples through the field of your awareness. These ripples influence the way you interpret events, the opportunities you notice, the choices you make, and even the way others respond to you. Over time, what began as a small internal pattern can expand into a much larger structure of experience. This is why ancient teachings often emphasize the importance of mental discipline, not because thoughts are dangerous in themselves, but because they are creative. The mind is constantly drawing invisible shapes within the fabric of consciousness. Some of these shapes are harmonious and balanced. Others are chaotic and unstable. When a person continually focuses on fear, limitation, or resentment, the internal patterns formed by those states become complex webs of tension. They influence perception in such a way that the world begins to appear hostile, unpredictable, or unfair. On the other hand, when a person consistently cultivates clarity, gratitude, and purposeful intention, the geometry of the mind becomes more coherent. The patterns formed by those states begin to organize experience in a very different direction. You can observe this process in your own life if you look closely enough. Think about a time when you expected something to go wrong. Perhaps you entered a situation already convinced that it would fail. Notice how that expectation influenced your behavior. Your body language may have become tense. Your communication may have grown cautious or defensive. You may have overlooked helpful opportunities simply because your attention was focused on confirming the expectation you already carried. The internal design shaped the external experience. The geometry of the thought created a pathway through which reality unfolded. Now imagine the opposite situation. Imagine approaching an opportunity with calm confidence and a clear internal image of success. The same environment may exist around you, but your perception of it changes dramatically. Possibilities become more visible. Your tone of voice becomes more relaxed. Your decisions become more aligned with your intention. Slowly, circumstances begin arranging themselves in ways that support the inner pattern you are holding. Again, the geometry of thought influences the architecture of experience. This does not mean that every single event in life is controlled by conscious intention. Reality is far more complex than that. But it does suggest that your inner state participates in shaping the probability of outcomes. The patterns formed within your mind interact with the patterns already present in the world. Where they align, events begin to organize themselves more smoothly. Where they conflict, friction appears. Ancient philosophers often describe this interaction as a relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm. The microcosm refers to the inner universe of the human mind. The macrocosm refers to the greater universe outside the body. According to this view, the same principles that shape stars, plants, and natural systems also operate within consciousness. When the inner patterns of thought are coherent, they resonate more easily with the larger patterns of the universe. When they are fragmented or chaotic, the connection becomes distorted. Sacred geometry was one way of illustrating this relationship. The geometric forms represented harmony, balance, proportion, and unity. They symbolized the idea that the universe operates through patterns that are both beautiful and precise. When people contemplated these forms, they were not simply admiring shapes. They were training their minds to recognize order within complexity. The same principle can apply to the patterns of your thoughts. Each thought you repeat becomes part of an internal design. Each belief you accept adds another line to the blueprint of your life. Slowly, almost invisibly, these designs begin influencing the structures that appear in your experience. You may not see the geometry directly, but you can observe its results. If you begin paying attention to the quality of your inner patterns, something remarkable happens. You realize that the mind is not merely reacting to life, it is participating in the construction of it. Your thoughts are not isolated sparks. They are the lines of an invisible architecture that gradually shapes the world you move through. And once you understand this, a new responsibility emerges. If the mind is capable of forming patterns that influence reality, then every thought becomes significant. Every belief becomes a structural element. You are not simply experiencing life, you are quietly designing it from the inside out. Once you begin to understand that your thoughts form patterns and that those patterns quietly influence the architecture of your life, another principle begins to emerge, one that explains how these patterns actually interact with reality. This principle is resonance. The universe does not operate like a machine responding to commands. It behaves more like a vast field of vibration. Everything within it, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, exists as movement, frequency, and rhythm. And within that immense field of motion, your own consciousness also carries a frequency. Your thoughts are not silent. Your emotions are not invisible forces without effect. They generate a tone within the field of awareness, and that tone determines what you naturally align with. You can observe resonance in simple physical systems. If two tuning forks are tuned to the same frequency and one of them is struck, the other will begin vibrating even though it was never touched. The vibration transfers through the surrounding air, activating the second fork because its structure matches the frequency being produced. The same phenomenon occurs in countless forms across nature. Certain materials resonate with particular sound waves. Certain structures amplify specific vibrations. Systems that share compatible frequencies naturally begin to synchronize. This principle of resonance is not limited to sound or physics. It appears to operate within consciousness as well. Consider how emotions influence perception. When you are joyful, calm, or hopeful, the world appears very different than when you are anxious, angry, or discouraged. The environment around you may be exactly the same, yet the experiences you notice within it change dramatically. Opportunities seem more visible, conversations unfold more easily, ideas appear with greater clarity. What has changed is not necessarily the external world, but the frequency through which you are experiencing it. Your internal state begins resonating with different aspects of reality. This is why manifestation is often misunderstood. Many people believe that creating change in their lives requires intense force, constant effort, or the attempt to control every detail of an outcome. They imagine that if they simply think hard enough or push strongly enough, reality will eventually obey their desires. But the deeper principle of resonance suggests something very different. Manifestation does not occur through pressure. It occurs through alignment. Instead of forcing events into existence, the individual gradually enters a state that naturally attracts the experiences corresponding to that state. Think about how a river flows. The river does not struggle to reach the ocean. It follows the natural slope of the landscape. The movement is continuous, guided by gravity and the shape of the terrain. In a similar way, when your inner state becomes aligned with a particular outcome, life begins flowing toward that outcome through pathways that often appear effortless. Conversations happen at the right moment. Ideas arrive unexpectedly. Encounters occur that seem strangely well-timed. From the outside, these events may look like coincidences, but they often emerge from the invisible alignment between inner state and external circumstance. However, there is another element within this process that many people overlook. Resonance alone is not enough. There must also be allowance. Allowance means the willingness to let the unfolding happen without constant interference from doubt, fear, or impatience. Imagine planting a seed in the soil. Once the seed is planted, its growth does not accelerate because you dig it up every day to check its progress. In fact, constant interference can prevent it from growing at all. The seed requires a period of quiet development beneath the surface before the first visible sprout appears. Your intentions function in a similar way. When you form a clear vision and combine it with a genuine emotional state that supports it, you plant a kind of energetic seed within consciousness. But if that intention is immediately followed by persistent doubt questions like, "What if it doesn't happen?" or "Maybe this is impossible," the internal pattern becomes unstable. The frequency shifts back and forth, interrupting the resonance that would otherwise guide events toward fulfillment. Allowance does not mean passivity. It does not mean abandoning action or ignoring responsibility. Instead, it means maintaining a steady internal state while remaining open to the natural sequence through which events develop. In other words, you participate in the process without attempting to control every step of it. You move with life rather than against it. One of the most powerful aspects of allowance is that it removes the tension that often surrounds desire. When people strongly want something, they sometimes focus more on the absence of it than on the possibility of it. They constantly notice the gap between their current reality and the reality they wish to experience. This focus on lack generates a frequency that resonates with further experiences of lack. The more attention given to the absence of something, the more solid that absence appears. Allowance shifts attention in a different direction. Instead of focusing on what is missing, it focuses on the internal state associated with the desired experience. If you wish to experience abundance, you begin cultivating the emotional tone of abundance. Now, gratitude, confidence, openness to opportunity. If you wish to experience love, you begin embodying the qualities of love within your own awareness: kindness, patience, generosity of spirit. As these internal states stabilize, they create resonance with environments and relationships that reflect them. The remarkable thing about this process is that it often unfolds quietly. The external changes may not appear immediately dramatic, but over time, subtle shifts accumulate. The kinds of people you encounter begin to change. The types of opportunities that appear in your path become different. Decisions that once felt confusing become clearer without realizing it. You have begun moving within a different current of experience. This is the natural flow of manifestation. It is not about controlling the universe as though it were an object separate from you. It is about understanding that you are already participating in a vast field of energy and awareness. Your thoughts, emotions, and expectations are part of that field. They influence the frequencies with which you resonate. When resonance is established and allowance is present, life often begins arranging itself in ways that feel surprisingly harmonious. Paths open where none seemed visible before. Obstacles dissolve or transform into unexpected opportunities. What once appeared complicated begins unfolding with quiet simplicity, and as you observe this process more closely, you begin to realize something profound. Manifestation is not an extraordinary event reserved for rare moments of spiritual insight. It is happening continuously. Every thought you sustain, every emotion you nurture, every expectation you accept is contributing to the resonance that shapes your experience. The only question is whether that resonance is unconscious and accidental, or intentional and aligned with the life you truly wish to create. Once you begin to understand resonance and the natural flow through which manifestation unfolds, another layer of the process reveals itself, one that is far more intimate and immediate than most people realize. It is the rhythm of your own presence. Manifestation does not occur only through ideas or intentions held in the mind. It also moves through the body, through breath, through the emotional atmosphere you carry from moment to moment. In other words, the state you inhabit right now is constantly shaping the field through which life responds to you, and among the many states a human being can cultivate, few are as powerful, stabilizing, and quietly transformative as gratitude combined with conscious breathing. Consider the simple act of breathing. It is so constant that most people rarely notice it. From the moment you are born until the moment your life ends, breath moves through you in an unbroken rhythm, yet this rhythm does more than sustain the body. It also connects the physical and the psychological dimensions of your experience. When your mind becomes anxious, your breathing changes. It becomes shallow, quick, irregular. When your mind becomes calm, your breathing naturally deepens and slows. Breath mirrors the state of consciousness, but what many people overlook is that this relationship works both ways. Just as your emotional state influences your breathing can influence your emotional state. When you slow your breath deliberately, something remarkable happens inside the nervous system. The body begins shifting from a state of tension to a state of equilibrium. The heart rate steadies, muscles soften, the mind becomes less reactive. This shift is not mystical in itself, it is physiological, yet the effects extend far beyond biology. A calm nervous system allows awareness to expand beyond the immediate reactions that normally dominate perception. Instead of being pulled by every passing thought or emotion, you begin to experience a sense of inner space. Within that space, clarity emerges. This clarity is essential because manifestation does not respond well to chaotic states of mind. When thoughts are scattered and emotions fluctuate rapidly, the internal patterns we spoke about earlier become unstable. It is like trying to draw a precise design on water that is constantly disturbed by waves. Conscious breathing quiets those waves. It creates a still surface upon which intention can form more clearly. But breathing alone is only part of the rhythm. The other element is gratitude. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a simple act of politeness or appreciation for things that have already happened. In reality, gratitude is a powerful state of alignment. When you genuinely feel gratitude, your attention shifts away from lack and toward recognition of value. Instead of focusing on what is missing, you begin noticing what is already present. This subtle change in perspective reorganizes your emotional field. Imagine walking through a garden while searching only for weeds. Your attention will naturally move toward everything that is wrong with the environment. You will see disorder everywhere. But if you walk through the same garden looking for beauty, your perception changes immediately. Flowers that once went unnoticed suddenly stand out. Colors appear richer. Fragrance becomes noticeable. The garden itself has not changed. Yet your experience of it becomes completely different because your attention has shifted. Gratitude functions in much the same way. It trains the mind to perceive abundance rather than deficiency. This shift has profound effects on resonance. When a person continuously focuses on problems, limitations, or fears, the emotional tone of that focus reinforces similar patterns of experience. Attention becomes magnetized toward difficulty, but when gratitude becomes the dominant emotional state, the mind begins resonating with possibilities rather than obstacles. It does not mean that challenges disappear from life, but the way those challenges are interpreted changes dramatically. Instead of appearing as threats, they often become signals guiding growth or redirection. Breath and gratitude together create a rhythm that stabilizes consciousness. Each slow inhalation anchors attention in the present moment. Each exhalation releases tension accumulated through worry or distraction. When gratitude is introduced into this rhythm, the emotional tone of awareness begins rising naturally. You are no longer waiting for external events to justify positive feelings. Instead, you generate the state internally first. This internal generation is crucial because manifestation responds more readily to what you consistently feel than to what you occasionally hope for. Many people attempt to visualize outcomes while their emotional state remains anxious or doubtful. They imagine success, abundance, or peace while simultaneously feeling the tension of uncertainty. In such situations, the emotional frequency of doubt tends to overpower the imagined outcome. The mind sends mixed signals into the field of consciousness. Breath and gratitude solve this problem by stabilizing the emotional environment before intention is introduced. They prepare the inner landscape so that visualization or expectation can take root without resistance. As this rhythm becomes familiar, a deeper transformation begins occurring. You start recognizing that your sense of well-being does not depend entirely on external circumstances. You can influence your state from within by returning to breath and cultivating appreciation. This recognition leads to a form of inner authority that could be called sovereign presence. Sovereignty here does not refer to dominance over others or control over every event. It refers to mastery over your own state of consciousness. Instead of being pushed and pulled by the environment, you become capable of choosing the internal atmosphere through which you experience that environment. This sovereignty is subtle yet powerful. When a person consistently maintains calm awareness and gratitude, their presence affects the dynamics of interactions around them. Conversations become more balanced. Conflicts de-escalate more easily. Opportunities emerge through relationships that respond positively to the energy being expressed. People often describe such individuals as grounded, centered, or quietly influential. What they are sensing is not simply personality, it is the coherence of a nervous system and mind operating in harmony. Over time, the rhythm of breath and gratitude begins shaping everyday life. Instead of rushing through moments unconsciously, you become more attentive to the quality of experience unfolding right now. Small details become meaningful. The sound of wind through trees, the warmth of sunlight. The simple act of walking or speaking begins carrying a sense of presence. Life is no longer perceived only as a sequence of goals and outcomes. It becomes a living process, unfolding through awareness itself. And within this process, manifestation operates far more smoothly. Intentions arise naturally from clarity rather than desperation. Actions follow those intentions with less internal conflict. Because the emotional field remains stable, resonance with supportive circumstances becomes easier. What once required intense effort begins occurring through a quieter alignment between inner state and outer movement. The rhythm of sovereign presence is not something that must be perfected all at once. It develops gradually, one breath at a time. Each moment of gratitude strengthens it. Each return to conscious breathing reinforces it. Slowly, the mind learns that peace and creative power do not depend on controlling the world outside. They arise from the simple, steady recognition that awareness itself is the center from which life is experienced and shaped. When the mind becomes steady through breath and gratitude, something subtle begins to change in the way you experience the world. The noise of constant reaction slowly fades, and in its place a different quality of perception appears. You begin noticing that reality itself seems to carry a rhythm, a quiet coherence beneath the surface of events. Most people move through life too quickly to perceive this deeper layer. They react to circumstances, chase outcomes, worry about the future, replay the past, and in doing so they remain surrounded by a kind of mental static. But when the mind grows quieter, you start hearing something else, a hidden harmony woven into the structure of existence itself. Think about music for a moment. When you listen to a symphony for the first time, you may notice only the dominant melody. The louder instruments draw your attention, while the subtle layers in the background remain almost invisible. But if you listen more carefully, you begin to hear the deeper complexity of the composition. The violins, the cellos, the quiet movement of the woodwinds, the rhythm of percussion, all of these elements interact to create a unified piece of music. Reality functions in a similar way. On the surface, life appears as a sequence of random events. Yet beneath that surface there are patterns, timing, spontaneous relationships between circumstances that begin to feel strangely coordinated when you become attentive enough to perceive them. This perception does not arise through intellectual effort alone. It emerges from a state of listening, not the kind of listening that focuses only on words or sounds, but a broader form of awareness that observes the subtle movements of life as they unfold. When you cultivate this type of listening, you begin noticing moments of synchronicity, events that seem unrelated on the surface, yet align in ways that carry meaning. A conversation appears just when you are reflecting on a particular question. A piece of information arrives precisely when you need it. An unexpected encounter redirects your path in a way that later reveals itself as significant. These moments are often dismissed as coincidence, but when they appear repeatedly, a deeper curiosity begins to grow. Listening to the hidden harmony of reality means recognizing that life may be responding to your inner state in ways that are more intricate than simple cause and effect. When your awareness becomes clear and receptive, the field of possibilities around you seems to communicate through subtle signals. These signals rarely appear as dramatic revelations. More often they arrive as quiet intuitions, gentle impulses, or sudden clarity about what direction to take next. The challenge is that such signals are easily drowned out by the noise of doubt and overthinking. Imagine trying to hear a soft melody while standing beside a busy highway. The sound exists, but the surrounding noise overwhelms it. Many minds operate like that highway, filled with constant internal dialogue, worry, analysis, and emotional turbulence. Under such conditions, the intuitive guidance that might otherwise appear remains unheard. When the mind becomes calmer, however, the background noise fades. What was once too subtle to notice begins to stand out. One of the most powerful aspects of this listening is that it reconnects you with the present moment. The hidden harmony of reality is never found in the past or the future. It reveals itself only in the unfolding of the present. When you are fully attentive to what is happening now, you begin sensing how one event flows naturally into the next. The sequence of experiences starts to feel less like a chaotic chain of accidents and more like an unfolding pattern. This does not mean that life becomes perfectly predictable. The future remains open, shaped by countless influences, but the feeling of randomness begins to soften. You start recognizing that there are currents moving through reality, currents of opportunity, growth, connection, and transformation. By listening carefully, you can often sense which direction these currents are moving and adjust your actions accordingly. This is why many spiritual traditions emphasize intuition. Intuition is not simply a mysterious feeling without explanation. It is often the mind's ability to detect patterns that are too subtle for conscious analysis. Your awareness registers relationships between events, emotional tones in interactions, or shifts in circumstances before your rational mind fully understands them. When you learn to listen to these signals without immediately dismissing them, you gain access to a form of guidance that operates beneath ordinary thought. However, listening to the harmony of reality requires patience. The modern world encourages constant activity and immediate answers. People are trained to search aggressively for solutions, to force progress through effort alone. While effort has its place, there are moments when stepping back and listening becomes far more powerful. Just as a musician must pause to hear the rhythm before playing the next note, a person must sometimes become still enough to sense what life itself is suggesting. There is also a deeper implication hidden within this harmony. If reality responds to consciousness through resonance, as we explored earlier, then the signals you perceive are not separate from you. They arise within the same field of awareness that you inhabit. In other words, the guidance you sense may not be coming from an external authority directing your life. It may be emerging from the deeper intelligence that already exists within the fabric of your own consciousness. When people speak about trusting life or trusting the universe, they are often pointing toward this realization. Trust does not mean blindly assuming that everything will always unfold according to personal preferences. It means recognizing that the process of life contains an intelligence that is constantly adapting and reorganizing. When you listen carefully, you begin aligning with that intelligence instead of resisting it. This alignment changes the way you make decisions. Instead of acting purely from pressure, fear, or social expectation, you begin paying attention to the quiet signals of coherence. Certain paths feel open and natural, while others feel strained or forced. Listening allows you to sense these differences before committing yourself to a direction that may lead to unnecessary conflict. Over time, the practice of listening transforms your relationship with reality. Life no longer feels like a puzzle you must constantly solve through mental effort. Instead, it becomes a conversation between your awareness and the unfolding world around you. Your role is not only to act, but also to observe, to sense, and to respond with clarity. And as you deepen this capacity, something beautiful begins to happen. The hidden harmony that once seemed distant becomes more familiar. The timing of events begins making subtle sense. The path forward reveals itself step by step, not through force, but through attentive presence. You realize that reality has always been speaking in quiet patterns, waiting patiently for the moment when you become still enough to listen. When you begin listening to the quiet harmony beneath the surface of reality, another truth slowly becomes clear. Life is not responding only to what you think about occasionally. It responds most strongly to the state you repeatedly embody. This is where intention becomes something far deeper than a simple wish. Intention is not merely a statement of what you want to happen. It is a direction of consciousness. It is the deliberate orientation of your awareness toward a certain reality, combined with the emotional state that allows that reality to feel natural within you. Most people misunderstand intention because they treat it like a request sent outward into the universe. They say what they want, imagine it briefly, and then return to a state of doubt, worry, or frustration when nothing appears immediately. In that moment, the original intention loses its coherence. It becomes scattered among competing emotional signals. But true intention functions differently. It is not fragile or temporary. It becomes powerful when it is sustained long enough for your inner state to reorganize around it. Think about how a compass works. The needle inside the compass always seeks alignment with the magnetic field of the earth. It may tremble slightly. It may drift if disturbed, but eventually it returns to the same orientation. Intention functions in a similar way within consciousness. When your intention becomes clear and stable, it acts like a directional force. Your attention begins aligning with it naturally. Your decisions begin reflecting it. Your perception starts filtering experiences through it. Over time, the inner orientation becomes so consistent that life around you begins responding to it as well. However, intention alone is not enough. There is another component that determines whether intention remains weak or becomes transformative. That component is emotional elevation. Emotion is the energy that activates intention. Without emotional energy, a thought remains only a concept. It has structure but no movement. When emotion is added, the intention begins generating momentum within the field of consciousness. Consider the difference between imagining something casually and imagining something with deep conviction. In the first case, the mind plays with an idea briefly and then lets it dissolve. In the second case, the idea becomes vivid. It carries feeling, expectation, and presence. You can almost sense it as though it already exists in some subtle way. That difference in feeling changes the entire dynamic of manifestation. The emotional tone you generate becomes the frequency that resonance responds to. Emotional elevation does not mean forcing yourself to feel artificially excited or constantly enthusiastic. Genuine elevation arises from states that naturally expand awareness, gratitude, appreciation, compassion, curiosity, inspiration. These emotions lift attention beyond narrow survival concerns and place it within a broader field of possibility. When intention is combined with such emotions, the mind enters a creative state. In that state, the boundaries between imagination and reality begin softening, allowing new patterns to form. You can see this process in creative work. Artists, inventors, and visionaries often speak about moments when an idea seems to come alive within them. They do not simply think about the creation, they feel it. They sense its presence before it fully appears in the physical world. That emotional connection fuels their persistence and shapes their decisions. What begins as an inner vision gradually becomes something tangible because the emotional energy behind it remains consistent. Yet there is another aspect of intention that ancient traditions often emphasized: the act of naming. Naming is not merely attaching a label to something, it is the recognition and declaration of an inner power that already exists within consciousness. When you name something clearly, you define its identity within your awareness. Vague desires carry little direction, but when a desire is named with clarity, it becomes easier for the mind to organize around it. For example, a person may say, "I want my life to improve." This is an intention, but it lacks specificity. The mind cannot easily form a coherent pattern around such a general idea. But if the intention becomes clearer, "I intend to cultivate a life of creative purpose," or "I intend to experience relationships built on mutual respect and understanding," the inner structure changes. The mind begins searching for behaviors, environments, and opportunities that align with the named intention. Naming also activates responsibility. When you clearly name an intention, you become aware of the ways your current habits either support or contradict it. If you name peace as an intention, you begin noticing moments when your thoughts generate unnecessary tension. If you name growth as an intention, you become more sensitive to situations where fear encourages avoidance. In this way, naming transforms intention from a passive hope into an active orientation of life. Emotional elevation strengthens this process further. When the emotion behind the intention remains elevated, the named direction begins feeling natural rather than forced. You do not constantly remind yourself to pursue it because your emotional state keeps drawing your attention toward it. Decisions begin aligning with it almost automatically. The inner and outer worlds start moving in the same direction. One of the most fascinating aspects of this process is that it gradually transforms identity itself. At first, intention may feel like something you are trying to achieve in the future. But as emotional elevation stabilizes and the intention becomes integrated into your daily awareness, the sense of self begins shifting. You no longer feel like someone striving to become something different. Instead, you begin feeling like the person who naturally embodies the qualities you once imagined. This shift is crucial because manifestation responds more strongly to identity than to desire alone. When a person continues identifying with limitation while hoping for abundance, the internal signals remain contradictory. But when identity evolves, when the individual begins experiencing themselves as capable, creative, and aligned with their intention, the resonance with new circumstances strengthens dramatically. It is important to remember that this transformation rarely happens overnight. Identity is shaped through repetition. Each time you return to your intention, elevate your emotional state, and affirm the direction you have named, the internal pattern becomes more stable. Gradually, the new orientation feels familiar. What once required effort begins happening naturally. In this sense, intention, emotion, and naming function together as a creative triad. Intention provides direction. Emotional elevation supplies energy. Naming clarifies the form through which that energy flows. When these three elements operate in harmony, the individual begins experiencing a quiet but unmistakable sense of inner power. It is not the power of domination or control over others. It is the power of coherence within oneself. And when coherence appears within consciousness, the world often begins responding in ways that mirror that coherence. Opportunities align with intention. Encounters support growth. Circumstances reorganize around the identity you are gradually embodying. The more clearly you name your direction and sustain the emotional atmosphere that supports it, the more consistently life begins reflecting that inner design. When intention becomes clear and emotional elevation begins energizing that intention, another dimension of consciousness quietly begins, revealing itself, the language through which the mind organizes meaning. Human beings do not experience reality only through raw perception. We interpret the world through symbols, sounds, image, and words that shape how we understand everything around us. These elements are so deeply woven into our thinking that we rarely question their influence. Yet when you begin examining them more closely, you discover that symbols and sound play a powerful role in shaping expectation. And expectation in turn becomes one of the most creative forces operating within consciousness. Think about the role symbols play in everyday life. A simple shape or image can evoke powerful emotions without a single word being spoken. A flag can inspire loyalty, pride, or conflict, depending on the meaning attached to it. A wedding ring carries the symbolism of commitment and partnership. Even numbers or geometric patterns often carry associations that influence how people perceive situations. Symbols compress meaning into a form that the mind can recognize instantly. Because of this, they become powerful tools for organizing belief and expectation. The same principle operates inside your mind. Every belief you hold is supported by internal symbols, images, memories, phrase, or stories that reinforce what you expect to be true. If a person believes the world is dangerous, their mind will repeatedly recall symbols of threat, past disappointments, stories of failure, warnings learned from childhood. These internal symbols reinforce the expectation of difficulty. In contrast, someone who believes that life offers opportunities will recall different symbols, moments of success, examples of kindness, memories of growth. Their internal imagery strengthens a completely different expectation. Expectation itself is one of the most underestimated forces in the process of manifestation. When you expect something consistently, your mind begins aligning perception, attention, and behavior toward that expectation. It filters information according to what it anticipates. Opportunities that match the expectation become easier to recognize, while contradictory evidence may pass unnoticed. In this way, expectation quietly influences the path of events, not because reality is magically bending to thoughts, but because consciousness is constantly interacting with the field of possibilities around it. Sound plays a similar role in shaping expectation. The words you repeat to yourself, both consciously and unconsciously, create internal narratives that guide your emotional state. Language is not merely a method of communication with others, it is also a method of programming your own mind. Each phrase you repeat becomes a signal reinforcing a particular pattern of belief. When a person frequently says, "Things never work out for me," the mind absorbs that statement as an expectation. Over time, the emotional tone of discouragement associated with those words begins influencing perception and action. Conversely, when a person consistently speaks with clarity and constructive intent, phrases like, "I am learning," "I am capable," or "I am open to new possibilities," the internal atmosphere shifts in a different direction. Ancient traditions often recognize this relationship between sound and consciousness. Many cultures use chants, mantras, or sacred words, not merely for religious ritual, but as a way of stabilizing the mind's focus. Repeating certain sounds created rhythmic patterns within awareness, allowing attention to settle into a coherent state. The vibration of sound combined with focused intention helped individuals sustain particular emotional and mental states. In modern terms, we might describe this as a way of reinforcing positive neural and emotional patterns through repetition. Symbols and sound together form a powerful interface between imagination and expectation. When you visualize a desired outcome clearly and accompany that visualization with words or phrases that affirm it, the mind begins organizing itself around that image. The emotional state associated with the image strengthens expectation, and expectation influences the way you interact with reality. This process does not guarantee that every imagined detail will unfold exactly as pictured, but it significantly alters the direction in which possibilities develop. You can observe the effect of expectation in simple situations. Imagine entering a conversation already expecting conflict. Your tone becomes cautious or defensive. You may interpret neutral remarks as criticism. The other person senses tension and responds in kind, creating the very conflict you anticipated. Now imagine approaching the same conversation expecting cooperation. Your posture relaxes. Your words become more open. The other person responds differently because the emotional atmosphere has changed. Expectations shaped the interaction long before any specific words were spoken. Symbols can amplify this effect because they allow the mind to hold complex meanings in a simple form. A person striving for growth might adopt a symbol that represents transformation, a spiral, a rising sun, or a particular geometric pattern. Each time the symbol appears, it reminds the mind of the direction it has chosen. Over time, the symbol becomes associated with a certain emotional state, reinforcing the expectation of progress. In this way, symbols act as anchors for intention. Sound works similarly when used consciously. The phrases you speak internally become a form of self-instruction. Many people carry internal dialogues filled with criticism or doubt without realizing how deeply those words influence expectation. When the language of the mind shifts toward clarity, encouragement, and purpose, the emotional atmosphere changes as well. The mind becomes more receptive to possibility rather than constrained by limitation. This does not mean that words or symbols possess magical power by themselves. Their influence arises from the meaning and emotional energy attached to them. A symbol is powerful only when it resonates with your intention. A phrase influences consciousness only when it is repeated with genuine attention. The creative force lies in the alignment between symbol, sound, emotion, and expectation. Over time, this alignment becomes a form of mental architecture. The images you hold, the words you repeat, and the expectations you sustain begin shaping the patterns through which your life unfolds. You become more aware of the narratives guiding your decisions and the symbols that define your sense of identity. Instead of allowing these influences to form unconsciously, you can begin selecting them deliberately. This awareness transforms ordinary experiences into tools for conscious creation. A simple phrase can become a reminder of your direction. A meaningful symbol can reconnect you with your intention during moments of uncertainty. The sound of your own voice repeating a constructive belief can gradually replace patterns of doubt that once felt automatic. And as this practice deepens, you begin to recognize something important. Expectation is not merely a reaction to reality, it is part of the creative process shaping reality. The images, sounds, and symbols that fill your awareness act like signals guiding your attention and behavior. When those signals align with a clear intention and an elevated emotional state, the creative force of expectation begins working quietly on your behalf, organizing the path ahead in ways that once seemed impossible to imagine. There comes a point in the journey of understanding where knowledge alone is no longer enough. You may have learned about intention, resonance, emotional elevation, symbols, and expectation. You may even begin sensing the subtle patterns through which consciousness shapes experience. Yet none of these principles become truly transformative until they pass through a quieter gate within the mind. That gate is silence, not the absence of sound in the physical world, but the stillness that appears when the constant commentary of thought finally loosens its grip on awareness. Silence is where clarity begins. It is where decision becomes possible. Most people live inside a nearly continuous stream of internal dialogue. The mind comments on everything. What has happened? What might happen? What could go wrong? What others might think. This ongoing conversation can feel so familiar that it becomes invisible, like background noise in a crowded room. Yet this noise has a powerful effect. It fragments attention. It keeps consciousness oscillating between past regrets and future anxieties. And when the mind is constantly moving in this way, decision becomes weak because every intention is immediately questioned by another thought pulling in the opposite direction. Silence interrupts this cycle. When the mind becomes quiet, even briefly, the scattered fragments of attention begin gathering into a single point of awareness. In that moment, something remarkable happens. Instead of reacting automatically to every passing thought, you observe them from a distance. The mind becomes like a clear sky in which thoughts drift like clouds rather than storms that control the weather. Within this quiet space, the possibility of real decision appears. Decision is often misunderstood as simply choosing between options. In everyday language, we say we have made a decision when we select one path instead of another. But at a deeper level, decision means something more fundamental. It means cutting away internal contradiction. The word itself comes from a root meaning to cut off. When you truly decide something, you remove the constant negotiation that previously surrounded it. Your attention no longer drifts back and forth between possibilities. Instead, it stabilizes around a single direction. This stabilization of attention is essential for manifestation because reality responds more consistently to coherence than to fluctuation. If you repeatedly declare an intention but immediately question it, the emotional and mental signals you generate remain mixed. It is like trying to tune a radio while constantly turning the dial in different directions. The signal never becomes clear. But when decision emerges from silence, the inner frequency becomes steady. The mind stops arguing with itself, and energy begins flowing toward the chosen direction. However, there is another step that many people overlook once a decision is made. They look outward for confirmation. They wait for visible evidence before allowing themselves to feel confident about the path they have chosen. If circumstances do not immediately reflect their intention, doubt returns, and the decision begins weakening. This habit reveals how deeply most people rely on external conditions to determine their internal state. The principle of gratitude before evidence reverses this pattern entirely. Instead of waiting for reality to prove that your decision was correct, you cultivate gratitude as though the outcome has already begun unfolding. This is not an act of pretending or ignoring the present moment. It is a deliberate shift in emotional alignment. Gratitude signals to your mind that the direction you have chosen is already supported by the deeper currents of life. To understand why this matters, imagine two individuals who set the same intention. Both decide to pursue a meaningful goal. The first person immediately begins scanning the environment for proof that success is possible. When obstacles appear, they interpret them as signs that the decision might have been unrealistic. Their emotional state fluctuates between hope and discouragement. The second person also notices obstacles, but instead of interpreting them as evidence of failure, they maintain a quiet gratitude for the process itself. They appreciate each step, each lesson, each small indication that movement is occurring. Their emotional state remains steady even when progress appears slow. Over time, these two approaches lead to very different experiences. The first person's fluctuating state creates internal resistance. Doubt interrupts persistence, and the original intention gradually weakens. The second person's gratitude reinforces coherence. Because their emotional state remains elevated, their attention stays aligned with the direction they chose. Opportunities that support the intention become easier to notice, and actions that move the process forward happen more naturally. Gratitude before evidence is powerful because it shifts the relationship between inner state and outer circumstance. Instead of allowing conditions to determine your emotional atmosphere, you generate the atmosphere internally and allow conditions to respond. This principle appears again and again in spiritual teachings, though it is often described in different language. The core idea remains the same. The emotional state you sustain becomes the lens through which reality organizes itself around you. Silence supports this process because it keeps the mind from immediately undermining the decision with analysis and worry. When you return to silence regularly through breath, meditation, or simple moments of still awareness, you reconnect with the clarity that made the decision possible in the first place. The mind becomes less reactive to temporary setbacks and more attentive to the broader movement of life unfolding through the intention you have chosen. Another important aspect of silence is that it reconnects you with intuition. Once the decision has been made and gratitude stabilizes your emotional state, subtle guidance often begins appearing. You may notice small impulses suggesting a conversation to initiate, an idea to explore, or a direction to investigate. These signals are easily overlooked when the mind is filled with noise, but in silence they become easier to recognize. Intuition begins functioning like a quiet compass, guiding your actions step by step. It is important to understand that silence, decision, and gratitude do not eliminate uncertainty from life. The future always contains unknown elements. What these practices change is your relationship with that uncertainty. Instead of feeling threatened by what has not yet appeared, you begin trusting the process unfolding through your chosen direction. Your role becomes less about forcing results and more about maintaining the inner coherence that allows results to develop. As this coherence strengthens, something unexpected often happens. The need for constant reassurance fades. You no longer require immediate evidence to believe in the path you have chosen. The gratitude you cultivate becomes its own confirmation. It reminds you that the creative process is already in motion, even when its visible form has not yet fully appeared. In this way, silence prepares the mind, decision stabilizes intention, and gratitude energizes the unfolding. Together, they form a powerful foundation for conscious creation. The world outside may still appear uncertain, but within that uncertainty, your awareness becomes steady. And from that steadiness, the next steps of your journey begin to reveal themselves. Once silence has steadied the mind, once decision has removed the internal conflict, and once gratitude has begun shaping the emotional atmosphere before visible results appear, another element quietly becomes essential to the unfolding process. That element is vision. Vision is not simply imagination in the casual sense. It is the ability to hold a clear inner picture of a direction your life is moving toward. It is the mind's way of seeing possibility before it becomes form. Without vision, intention lacks shape. Without vision, energy disperses because there is nothing for awareness to organize around. But when vision becomes clear, consciousness begins building pathways that lead toward it. Think of vision as a kind of internal compass that shows you not only where you are, but where your deeper potential is pointing. Many people drift through life, responding to circumstances as they appear, but rarely stopping to ask what kind of life they are truly moving toward. They react, adapt, solve problems, and pursue temporary goals. Yet their deeper direction remains undefined. Vision changes that entirely. It gathers the scattered fragments of desire and aligns them into a coherent image of possibility. Once that image becomes vivid enough, the mind begins recognizing opportunities that resonate with it. However, vision alone is not the full story. Vision interacts with a principle that is just as powerful but often less understood: reciprocity. Reciprocity is the law of exchange that quietly operates within every system of life. It is the principle that what you give into the field of experience eventually returns through the same field. Nature itself demonstrates this continuously. Seeds placed into soil eventually become plants. Energy invested into growth eventually produces fruit. In human experience, the same pattern appears in more subtle ways. The quality of attention you give to life influences the quality of experience that life reflects back to you. When vision and reciprocity work together, something remarkable happens. The image you hold of your future begins shaping the actions you take in the present. Those actions, when aligned with generosity, integrity, and purpose, begin creating conditions that support the vision. In other words, the future you imagine starts influencing the present you live, and the present you live gradually builds the future you imagined. The two begin feeding each other in a continuous cycle of creation. Consider a person who carries a vision of becoming a creator, someone who contributes meaningful ideas or work to the world. That vision will influence the way they spend their time, the conversations they engage in, the knowledge they seek, and the projects they begin exploring. If they approach this path with reciprocity, offering their creativity in service to others rather than only seeking personal recognition, something powerful begins happening. Their work attracts attention, collaboration, and opportunities not through force, but through the natural exchange created by contribution. Reciprocity also reveals why trust becomes necessary at this stage of the journey. Vision shows you where you want to go. Reciprocity guides the way you interact with the world while moving toward that direction. But neither of these can function fully if the mind remains trapped in constant suspicion or fear of loss. Trust becomes the doorway through which the process can continue unfolding. Trust is often misunderstood as blind optimism or the assumption that nothing difficult will ever happen. In reality, trust is the willingness to continue moving forward, even when the complete path is not visible. It is the recognition that life unfolds step by step rather than revealing the entire map at once. When a person refuses to move until every outcome is guaranteed, progress becomes impossible. But when trust enters the equation, movement becomes possible because uncertainty is no longer perceived as a threat. Imagine standing before a doorway in a dimly lit hallway. You cannot see what lies beyond the door completely, yet something about the direction you have been walking suggests that opening it may lead somewhere meaningful. Vision is what brought you to the door. Reciprocity is the way you treated the journey that led there. Trust is the decision to open the door even though the entire room behind it remains unseen. This doorway of trust appears repeatedly throughout life. It may show up as an opportunity that requires courage, a relationship that invites vulnerability, or a path that asks you to grow beyond your previous identity. Each time the doorway appears, the mind faces a choice. It can retreat into the safety of what is familiar, or it can step forward into the unknown, guided by the vision it carries. Trust becomes easier when you begin noticing how reciprocity operates within your own experiences. When you act with sincerity, offer value, and align your actions with your deeper intentions, life often responds with unexpected support. A conversation leads to an opportunity. A small act of generosity creates a meaningful connection. A risk taken with integrity opens a path that once seemed impossible. These moments reinforce the understanding that the field of life is not indifferent to your actions. It responds to the quality of energy you bring into it. Vision, reciprocity, and trust together form a powerful triad within conscious creation. Vision provides direction. Reciprocity ensures that your actions contribute positively to the world you are engaging with. Trust allows movement to continue even when results have not yet fully appeared. When these three elements remain aligned, the process of manifestation becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about participating in a living exchange between your consciousness and the larger world. Over time, something profound begins changing inside you. The future stops feeling like a distant destination you must chase. Instead, it begins emerging gradually through the choices you make each day. Vision guides your attention toward what is possible. Reciprocity shapes the quality of what you offer to life. Trust allows you to step through the doorways that appear along the path, and with each doorway you pass through, the landscape of your life expands. What once seemed uncertain begins revealing deeper patterns of connection. The path ahead may still contain mystery, but the fear of that mystery begins dissolving. You realize that every step taken with clear vision, generous exchange, and genuine trust is not only moving you toward the life you imagined, it is also transforming the person you are becoming along the way. Once vision has appeared, once reciprocity has begun shaping the way you interact with the world, and once trust has opened the door to movement beyond certainty, another force becomes necessary if the process is to continue unfolding. That force is persistence. Many people misunderstand manifestation because they imagine it as a single moment of insight or a powerful emotional experience that immediately changes everything. They believe that if their intention is clear enough and their mindset positive enough, reality should respond quickly and effortlessly. But the deeper truth is that manifestation is rarely a single event. It is a process, and like all meaningful processes, it requires continuous, steady movement in the same direction over time. Persistence is not simply stubbornness or blind repetition. It is the quiet discipline of remaining aligned with your chosen direction, even when visible evidence appears slowly. Think of a sculptor working with stone. The finished sculpture does not appear with the first strike of the chisel. Each movement shapes the surface a little more. At times, progress may feel invisible because the stone changes only slightly with each effort. Yet every strike contributes to the final form. Manifestation operates in a similar way. Each action taken in alignment with your vision, each moment of emotional coherence, each return to intention adds another layer to the structure you are building. The difficulty arises because the human mind often expects immediate results. Modern life conditions us to seek rapid responses. We send a message and expect an instant reply. We search for information and receive it within seconds. This habit of immediacy can create frustration when applied to deeper transformations that unfold gradually. When a person plants a seed in the soil, they do not expect fruit the next morning. They understand that growth requires time, nourishment, and consistency. Yet, when working with intention and consciousness, many people forget this natural rhythm. Continuance means honoring that rhythm. It means understanding that the field of life responds to patterns that are sustained, not to impulses that appear briefly and disappear. A single day of focused intention may create a spark, but persistence keeps the flame alive. The more consistently you return to your chosen state through thought, emotion, and action, the more stable the internal pattern becomes. Over time, this stability begins influencing the external world in ways that scattered effort never could. One of the greatest challenges to persistence is doubt. Doubt often arises when the outer world does not immediately mirror the inner vision. The mind begins questioning whether the effort is worthwhile. It compares present circumstances with the desired future and becomes discouraged by the distance between them. In that moment, many people abandon the process, believing the absence of immediate evidence means the vision was unrealistic. But what they fail to see is that persistence itself is part of the creative mechanism. The discipline of continuing despite temporary uncertainty gradually strengthens both character and clarity. Discipline in manifestation does not mean forcing yourself into rigid routines or suppressing natural emotions. Instead, it means returning again and again to the alignment you have chosen. When your mind drifts into fear or distraction, discipline gently guides it back to intention. When circumstances challenge your patience, discipline reminds you of the direction you decided to follow. This return does not have to be dramatic. Often it appears through small daily practices, moments of reflection, visualization, gratitude, or focused action that reinforce the inner pattern you wish to embody. Think of discipline as the bridge between vision and reality. Vision shows you what is possible, but discipline ensures that possibility remains alive in your awareness long enough to become form. Without discipline, vision fades into occasional inspiration. With discipline, inspiration becomes structure. Another aspect of persistence involves recognizing that manifestation rarely unfolds in a perfectly linear path. Many people imagine that once an intention is set, progress should move steadily upward without interruption. In reality, growth often includes periods of apparent stagnation or even temporary setbacks. These moments do not necessarily indicate failure. They may simply represent adjustments within the larger process. Just as a river changes course when encountering obstacles, the path of manifestation may shift direction before continuing toward the same destination. Persistence allows you to navigate these shifts without abandoning your vision. Instead of interpreting every difficulty as a sign to stop, you begin asking a different question. What can this moment teach me about the direction I am moving? Sometimes obstacles reveal weaknesses in the plan that need refinement. Sometimes they strengthen resilience and patience. Occasionally, they redirect attention toward opportunities that were previously unnoticed. Through persistence, you remain engaged with the process long enough to understand these signals rather than reacting impulsively. Continuance also strengthens identity. Earlier, we explored how manifestation becomes more powerful when intention evolves into a sense of self. Persistence supports this transformation. Each time you act in alignment with your vision, you reinforce the identity connected to it. A person who consistently writes becomes a writer not through a single moment of inspiration but through repeated engagement with the craft. A person who continually cultivates compassion gradually becomes someone recognized for their kindness. Identity forms through repetition, and persistence provides the repetition necessary for that formation. As identity changes, the effort required to maintain persistence often decreases. What once felt like discipline gradually becomes natural behavior. The individual no longer forces themselves to remain aligned with their intention because the intention has become part of who they are. Their actions, decisions, and emotional responses begin reflecting that identity automatically. Another powerful effect of persistence is the way it interacts with the principle of resonance we explored earlier. The longer a coherent pattern remains active within your consciousness, the more opportunities arise that match that pattern. At first, these opportunities may appear small or indirect, but as the pattern strengthens, the scale of alignment often increases. People enter your life who share similar visions. Situations arise that require the very skills you have been developing. The world begins responding more clearly because the signal you are sending into it has become steady. Persistence, therefore, transforms manifestation from a fleeting idea into a living process. It ensures that the creative forces of intention, emotion, vision, and trust remain active long enough for life to reorganize around them. Without persistence, even the most powerful insight can dissolve into memory. With persistence, insight becomes momentum. In the end, the discipline of manifestation is not about controlling reality. It is about remaining faithful to the direction you have chosen long enough for reality to respond. Each day you continue walking that path, even when progress seems slow. You are strengthening the invisible architecture of your future. And eventually there comes a moment when the structure that once existed only in vision begins appearing in tangible form. What seemed distant becomes present, not because it appeared suddenly, but because persistence quietly built the bridge that allowed it to arrive. There is a moment in the journey of inner understanding when persistence begins producing a quiet but profound realization. You begin to notice that the true center of power in your life has never been outside of you. It has never belonged to circumstances, other people, or random chance. Instead, it has always existed in the place from which you observe, interpret, and respond to everything that happens. That place is awareness itself. When this realization deepens, you begin to understand what can be called the throne of awareness, the position within consciousness from which your entire experience of reality is shaped. Most people live their lives without recognizing that such a throne even exists. They move through daily events, reacting to situations as they arise. If circumstances appear favorable, they feel hopeful. If circumstances become difficult, they feel discouraged. Their emotional state rises and falls depending on the conditions they encounter. In this way, the outer world appears to control the inner world. But when you begin observing your own mind carefully, something remarkable becomes visible. Between the event that occurs and the reaction that follows, there is always a moment of awareness, and within that moment lies a powerful choice. Awareness is the silent observer behind every thought and emotion you experience. It is the part of you that notices the mind's activity rather than being completely absorbed by it. When a thought appears, awareness is the space in which that thought is recognized. When an emotion arises, awareness is the field that allows the emotion to be felt. Yet because thoughts and emotions often move quickly, many people assume they are identical with them. They believe they are the fear, the anger, or the doubt passing through their mind. But the truth is more subtle. Those experiences appear within awareness, but they are not the awareness itself. Once you begin recognizing this distinction, a new form of sovereignty becomes possible. Sovereignty of mind does not mean controlling every thought that arises. Thoughts are often spontaneous, shaped by memory, habit, and environment. Instead, sovereignty means recognizing that you are not obligated to surrender your entire identity to every thought that appears. You can observe them, evaluate them, and choose which ones deserve your attention. In other words, awareness allows you to sit on the throne of your own consciousness rather than being pushed around by the countless mental impulses that pass through it. This shift may seem small at first, but its implications are enormous. When you occupy the throne of awareness, the relationship between you and your thoughts changes dramatically. Instead of being carried away by every fear or assumption, you begin examining the beliefs that guide your perception of reality. If a thought tells you that something is impossible, awareness allows you to ask whether that conclusion is truly accurate or simply a reflection of past experiences. If doubt appears, awareness gives you the space to recognize it without automatically accepting it as truth. In this way, sovereignty of mind becomes one of the most important foundations for manifestation and personal transformation. Earlier, we explored intention, emotional alignment, persistence, and trust. All of these processes depend on your ability to maintain a certain inner state long enough for it to influence your experience. But if awareness is absent, thoughts that contradict your intention may repeatedly take control of your attention. Fear may interrupt confidence. Worry may weaken trust. The mind becomes like a ship drifting in changing winds. Awareness stabilizes that ship. It allows you to notice the winds without losing your direction. Imagine standing on a hill, overlooking a wide landscape. From that vantage point you can see the rivers, forests, and valleys stretching into the distance. You are not lost within any single path because you are observing the entire terrain from above. Awareness functions in a similar way. It gives you a broader perspective on the movements of your own mind. This perspective also reveals something else that many people overlook. Attention is the currency of consciousness. Whatever you consistently place your attention upon becomes stronger in your experience. If attention repeatedly flows toward fear, the mind begins organizing itself around that emotion. If attention flows toward possibility, gratitude, and purpose, those states become more dominant. Awareness allows you to guide attention deliberately rather than allowing it to be captured automatically by the loudest or most dramatic thoughts. Consider what happens when you begin practicing this form of sovereignty in everyday life. A difficult situation appears. Your mind immediately generates thoughts predicting failure or disappointment. In the past, you may have believed those thoughts instantly, but now awareness intervenes. You notice the thought without surrendering your authority to it. You recognize that it is only one interpretation among many possible interpretations. From that position of awareness, you can choose a different response, one aligned with the intention and vision you have been cultivating. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending that challenges do not exist. Sovereignty of mind is not denial. It is the ability to interpret circumstances in ways that support growth rather than reinforce limitation. The same event can be viewed through multiple lenses. One perspective sees only difficulty, another sees opportunity for learning, adaptation, or transformation. Awareness allows you to select the perspective that empowers you rather than the one that diminishes your potential. Another important aspect of the throne of awareness is responsibility. Once you realize that your inner state plays such a significant role in shaping your experience, it becomes impossible to place all responsibility for your life on external conditions. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes the comfort of blaming circumstances. But it also introduces a profound sense of freedom. If awareness is the throne from which your perceptions arise, then you possess far more influence over your experience than you once believed. With responsibility comes the opportunity for deliberate creation. You can begin cultivating thoughts that support the direction you wish to move. You can reinforce emotional states that align with your intentions. You can examine beliefs inherited from the past and decide whether they still deserve authority in your present life. Over time, the inner environment of your mind becomes more coherent, more intentional, and more aligned with the vision you carry. As this coherence grows, something remarkable begins happening. External circumstances often start reflecting the internal stability you have developed. Relationships become clearer because your responses are less reactive. Opportunities appear more frequently because your attention recognizes them. Even challenges become easier to navigate because your awareness remains centered rather than overwhelmed. The throne of awareness, therefore, represents a profound shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who must constantly fight against the world to achieve desired outcomes, you begin recognizing yourself as the conscious participant, shaping how the world appears in your experience. Your thoughts become tools rather than masters. Your emotions become signals rather than dictators of behavior. And as you continue sitting upon this throne of awareness, the sovereignty of mind deepens. You no longer feel compelled to chase every passing thought or resist every uncomfortable emotion. Instead, you observe them with clarity, choose your direction with intention, and allow the creative process of consciousness to unfold through the steady authority of your own awareness. When awareness has matured enough for you to sit steadily upon the throne of your own mind, another subtle lesson begins revealing itself. It is a lesson many people misunderstand because it appears paradoxical at first. That lesson is the power of non-resistance. Most of us have been taught that progress requires constant struggle, that every obstacle must be fought, every negative emotion must be suppressed, and every uncomfortable memory must be pushed away. But the deeper you explore consciousness, the more clearly you begin to see that resistance often strengthens the very experiences you are trying to escape. What you fight internally does not disappear. It usually grows louder. What you reject tends to linger in the background of the mind, shaping perception in ways that remain invisible until awareness shines light upon it. Non-resistance does not mean passivity. It does not mean allowing harmful situations to continue or refusing to act when action is necessary. Instead, non-resistance refers to the inner posture with which you meet the experiences arising within your mind. When an emotion appears, fear, sadness, frustration, or regret, your first instinct may be to push it away. You may try to distract yourself, criticize yourself for feeling that way, or quickly replace the emotion with forced positivity. Yet, when you resist an emotion in this way, you unintentionally create tension within awareness. The mind divides itself into two opposing forces, the part experiencing the emotion and the part trying to eliminate it. This division drains energy and prevents understanding. When awareness chooses non-resistance, something different happens. Instead of pushing the emotion away, you allow it to appear within the field of consciousness without immediately judging it. You observe it with curiosity rather than fear. In that moment, the emotion begins revealing the message it carries. Emotions are not enemies of awareness. They are signals generated by memory, belief, and perception. They tell you where attention has become entangled with past experiences that have not yet been fully understood or integrated. This is where memory enters the process of healing. Many emotional patterns originate in memories stored within the mind. These memories may come from childhood experiences, moments of disappointment, or situations in which you felt misunderstood or powerless. Over time, the mind builds protective narratives around those memories in order to prevent similar pain from occurring again. While these narratives can provide temporary safety, they also shape expectations about the future. Without realizing it, you may carry assumptions that limit what you believe is possible. For example, a person who experienced rejection earlier in life may develop a subtle belief that connection will eventually lead to disappointment. Even if they consciously desire meaningful relationships, this underlying memory may influence how they interpret new interactions. Small signs of uncertainty may be perceived as confirmation that rejection is inevitable. The memory silently shapes perception, and perception reinforces the memory. This cycle can continue for years unless awareness interrupts it. Non-resistance provides the doorway through which this interruption becomes possible. When a memory arises accompanied by emotion, awareness can meet it without immediately defending against it. Instead of saying, "I should not feel this way," awareness asks a different question. What is this experience trying to reveal? This gentle curiosity softens the defensive patterns surrounding the memory. Gradually, the mind begins recognizing that the past event, while painful, does not need to dictate every future possibility. As this recognition deepens, healing begins occurring naturally. The emotional charge associated with the memory slowly dissolves because it is no longer being reinforced through resistance. When you stop fighting an emotion, you allow it to complete the cycle of expression that was interrupted when the experience originally occurred. The memory remains as information, but it no longer controls the emotional atmosphere of the present moment. Within this healing process, another surprising discovery emerges. Beneath many layers of tension, expectation, and protective belief lies a natural state of joy. This joy is not the temporary excitement that comes from external achievements or pleasurable experiences. It is a quieter, more stable sense of well-being that arises when awareness is no longer burdened by unresolved resistance. In many ways, It resembles the ease children often display before life's complexities begin shaping their perceptions. This return to joy does not erase the wisdom gained from difficult experiences. Instead, it integrates those experiences into a broader understanding of life. The past becomes a teacher rather than a prison. You recognize that every challenge carried lessons about resilience, compassion, or self-knowledge. When these lessons are acknowledged, the emotional energy once trapped in resistance becomes available again as creative vitality. Joy, therefore, becomes more than a pleasant emotion. It becomes an indicator of alignment between awareness and the present moment. When you feel genuine joy, even in simple situations, it often means that the mind is no longer divided against itself. Thoughts, emotions, and attention are moving together rather than in conflict. This coherence allows the creative processes we have been exploring throughout this journey to function more effectively. Manifestation flows more naturally when the mind is not weighed down by unresolved resistance. Another important aspect of non-resistance involves how you relate to the unfolding of life itself. Earlier, we explored persistence and discipline, recognizing that intention must be sustained over time. But persistence does not require constant tension or struggle. When discipline is combined with non-resistance, effort becomes balanced with ease. You continue taking actions aligned with your vision, yet you do not fight every moment that fails to match your expectations. Instead, you allow life to reveal its timing while maintaining your direction. This balance creates a rhythm within awareness. You act when action is needed, rest when reflection is helpful, and remain open to learning from each experience. The mind becomes less rigid and more adaptable. Obstacles no longer appear as enemies but as information guiding you toward refinement. This flexible state allows both growth and healing to occur simultaneously. Memory also begins transforming under the influence of awareness. Instead of storing experiences only as sources of regret or nostalgia, the mind begins viewing them as chapters within a larger narrative of development. Each memory becomes part of a story that continues evolving rather than a fixed event that defines identity. Through this perspective, you reclaim the freedom to reinterpret your past in ways that empower your future. The healing return to joy, therefore, represents more than emotional relief. It signifies the restoration of harmony between awareness, memory, and experience. When resistance fades, the mind becomes lighter. Attention flows more easily toward creativity, connection, and curiosity. Life begins feeling less like a series of problems to solve and more like a landscape to explore. In this state of non-resistant awareness, you rediscover something that may have been present within you all along. Beneath the layers of fear, expectation, and memory lies a quiet confidence in life's unfolding. It is the recognition that you do not need to control every moment to participate meaningfully in the creative process of existence. By allowing experiences to move through awareness without constant resistance, you open the space in which healing can occur and joy can return naturally, gently, and with a depth that no external achievement could ever fully provide. When the mind begins releasing resistance and the weight of old emotional patterns starts dissolving, a quieter and more fundamental state of being slowly becomes visible. Beneath the noise of constant wanting, beneath the endless pursuit of improvement, beneath even the desire to manifest a better future, there exists a deeper foundation of consciousness. That foundation is love, unconditional love, not the romantic idea often portrayed in stories, and not the approval we hope to receive from others, but a deeper quality of awareness that exists before judgment, before comparison, and before the mind begins dividing the world into what it likes and what it fears. Most people encounter the idea of unconditional love as a moral teaching. They are told to love others without conditions, to forgive easily, and to remain kind even when it feels difficult. While these teachings carry wisdom, they often remain intellectual ideals rather than lived experiences. The mind tries to follow them through effort and discipline, but effort alone cannot create unconditional love. True unconditional love arises naturally when awareness begins recognizing the deeper unity underlying all experience. Think about how the mind usually relates to the world. It categorizes constantly. This is good. That is bad. This is success. That is failure. This person supports me. That person opposes me. These categories are useful in practical life, but they also create emotional tension. When the mind becomes attached to its judgments, it begins defending them. It resists anything that threatens its preferred outcomes and clings to anything that appears to confirm its expectations. This pattern generates much of the anxiety and conflict people experience internally. Unconditional love dissolves this tension because it does not depend on whether circumstances match the mind's preferences. Instead, it arises from the recognition that every experience, pleasant or difficult, participates in the unfolding of consciousness. When you begin seeing life from this perspective, the need to constantly defend or control your experience begins softening. You still care deeply about your intentions and values, but your sense of peace no longer depends entirely on whether external conditions behave exactly as you hoped. One of the surprising results of this shift is simplicity. The more deeply awareness touches unconditional love, the simpler life begins to feel. Many desires that once seemed urgent gradually lose their intensity. This does not mean you stop pursuing goals or expressing creativity. Rather, the emotional pressure behind those pursuits relaxes. Instead of chasing fulfillment as though something essential is missing, you begin creating from a place that already feels whole. Consider how many desires arise from the belief that happiness lies somewhere in the future. A new achievement, a better relationship, greater recognition, financial security. Each of these can appear as the final piece needed to complete your life. But when you reach one goal, another desire often appears immediately afterward. The cycle continues because the underlying assumption remains unchanged. Fulfillment is always somewhere else. When unconditional love becomes more present in awareness, that assumption begins dissolving. You realize that peace is not the reward waiting at the end of desire. It is the foundation beneath desire itself. From this perspective, you can still pursue meaningful goals, but you do so without believing that your worth or happiness depends on the outcome. Desire becomes creative expression rather than emotional survival. This transformation changes the way you relate to other people as well. When love is conditional, relationships often become negotiations. You may unconsciously expect others to behave in ways that protect your sense of security or validate your identity. When those expectations are not met, disappointment and resentment arise. But when unconditional love begins guiding your perception, relationships shift from negotiation to appreciation. You recognize that every person carries their own journey of growth, confusion, learning, and transformation. Instead of demanding perfection from others, you become more capable of meeting them with understanding. This does not mean tolerating harmful behavior or abandoning healthy boundaries. Love without wisdom can become self-neglect. True unconditional love includes clarity about what supports growth and what undermines it. You can care deeply about someone while still recognizing when a situation requires distance or change. The difference is that your decisions arise from awareness and compassion rather than from reactive anger or fear. Another aspect of unconditional love involves how you treat yourself. Many people carry an inner voice that constantly evaluates their performance. It criticizes mistakes, compares achievements, and demands improvement. While this voice may appear to motivate progress, it often creates an atmosphere of tension that makes genuine growth more difficult. When unconditional love enters awareness, the relationship with yourself becomes gentler. You recognize that growth does not require harsh judgment. Just as a gardener nurtures a plant patiently, awareness can nurture personal development with encouragement rather than criticism. As simplicity deepens and love becomes less conditional, something remarkable emerges beneath the movement of desire. You begin noticing a quiet peace that was always present but often overlooked. This peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. It does not disappear when challenges arise. Instead, it functions like a calm ocean beneath the surface, waves of daily experience. Thoughts, emotions, and desires continue moving across the surface, but the deeper water remains steady. This peace is powerful because it stabilizes every other principle we have explored throughout this journey. Intention becomes clearer when it is not driven by desperation. Persistence becomes easier when your identity is not tied to immediate results. Trust becomes natural when you sense that life itself is not separate from the awareness experiencing it. The creative process of manifestation begins flowing more smoothly because the mind is no longer fighting itself. You may still set goals, imagine possibilities, and pursue transformation, but now these actions arise from a deeper place. Instead of asking life to complete you, you begin expressing the completeness already present within awareness. Your efforts become offerings rather than demands. Your achievements become celebrations rather than proofs of worth. And perhaps most importantly, you begin noticing beauty in moments that once seemed ordinary. A conversation, a quiet walk, a simple breath. Each of these experiences reveals the subtle presence of the peace that exists beneath desire. The world does not need to become perfect for this peace to be recognized. It only requires awareness to become quiet enough to feel it. In this way, unconditional love, simplicity, and the peace beneath desire form a quiet center within consciousness. From that center, life continues unfolding with its usual mixture of challenge and opportunity. Yet your relationship with that unfolding changes. You no longer chase fulfillment as though it were always just out of reach. Instead, you move through the world carrying a quiet understanding. The peace you were searching for was never separate from you. It has always been the ground from which every experience arises. There comes a moment in the journey of inner transformation when peace begins to reveal something deeper that had previously remained hidden. Up until this point, much of the work has involved clarity of intention, clarity of awareness, clarity of emotional alignment. You have learned to observe thoughts, release resistance, cultivate gratitude, and rest in the quiet peace beneath desire. Yet, as the mind becomes calmer and the heart more open, another layer of the human experience gradually appears. It is the layer many traditions describe as the shadow. The word shadow often sounds mysterious or even frightening, but its meaning is actually very simple. The shadow is the collection of thoughts, emotions, memories, and impulses that the conscious mind has learned to avoid or reject. These aspects of the self were not necessarily created because they were wrong or harmful. Often they formed in moments when the mind was trying to protect itself from pain, confusion, or rejection. A child who learns that certain emotions are not accepted may hide those emotions in order to feel safe. A person who experiences disappointment may suppress vulnerability in order to avoid future hurt. Over time, these hidden aspects accumulate beneath the surface of awareness. For many years, the shadow can remain invisible. The mind builds a self-image that highlights its strengths and preferred qualities, while quietly ignoring the parts that feel uncomfortable. But ignoring the shadow does not eliminate it. The energies stored there continue influencing behavior, perception, and emotional reactions. You may find yourself reacting strongly to situations without fully understanding why. Certain patterns repeat in relationships or decisions. Moments of insecurity or frustration appear even when everything seems stable. These experiences often reveal the subtle presence of the shadow. The journey toward deeper consciousness therefore involves not only cultivating light, but also transforming the shadow. This transformation does not mean fighting against hidden emotions or condemning parts of yourself that feel imperfect. In fact, the opposite approach is required. Shadow transformation begins when awareness becomes willing to look gently at what it once avoided. Instead of turning away from uncomfortable feelings, you allow them to be seen without judgment. This process requires courage because the shadow often carries emotions that were once difficult to face. Fear, jealousy, anger, shame, or grief may emerge as awareness begins illuminating previously hidden memories. The mind may initially resist this encounter because it associates those emotions with vulnerability. Yet, when awareness remains calm and compassionate, something remarkable begins happening. The emotions that once felt threatening start revealing the unmet needs or misunderstood experiences that created them. For example, anger sometimes hides a deeper feeling of being unheard or dismissed. Jealousy may reveal an unrecognized longing for appreciation or connection. Shame often arises from moments when the mind concluded that it was not worthy of acceptance. When these emotions are approached with awareness rather than resistance, their deeper messages become visible. Instead of remaining chaotic forces within the psyche, they become guides pointing toward areas that require healing and understanding. This is where the union of mind and heart begins taking place. The mind possesses the ability to observe, analyze, and recognize patterns. The heart carries the capacity for empathy, compassion, and acceptance. When these two aspects of consciousness operate separately, imbalance can occur. A purely analytical mind may become detached from emotional truth, while a heart overwhelmed by emotion may lose clarity of perspective. But when mind and heart work together, awareness becomes both intelligent and compassionate. During shadow transformation, the mind provides the clarity necessary to understand where certain emotional patterns originated. It recognizes how past experiences shaped beliefs about identity and safety. At the same time, the heart offers the acceptance required for healing. Instead of criticizing yourself for having these emotions, the heart allows you to acknowledge them with kindness. This union prevents the process from becoming either cold analysis or uncontrolled emotional release. It becomes a balanced dialogue between understanding and compassion. As this dialogue deepens, many of the energies stored in the shadow begin transforming naturally. Emotions that once felt heavy gradually lose their intensity because they are no longer suppressed or denied. When awareness allows them to be expressed and understood, they complete the cycle that was interrupted when they first appeared. What once functioned as internal conflict becomes integrated wisdom. Another surprising discovery emerges during this process. Many qualities hidden within the shadow are not negative at all. Some are simply aspects of strength or creativity that were discouraged earlier in life. A person who learned to suppress their assertiveness may rediscover confidence through shadow work. Someone who once hid their sensitivity may find that this sensitivity is actually a source of empathy and insight. By bringing these qualities into conscious awareness, you reclaim parts of yourself that were waiting to be recognized. This integration gradually creates harmony within consciousness. Instead of dividing your identity into acceptable and unacceptable parts, you begin experiencing yourself as a more complete being. The mind no longer needs to maintain constant defenses to protect its preferred self-image. The heart no longer carries unresolved emotions seeking recognition. Together they create a stable inner environment where growth can continue naturally. The union of mind and heart also strengthens your relationship with others. When you understand your own shadow, it becomes easier to recognize that other people are also navigating hidden layers within their consciousness. Instead of reacting harshly to their imperfections, you become more capable of responding with patience and understanding. This does not mean ignoring harmful behavior, but it does allow you to approach conflict with greater awareness of the deeper human experiences involved. In many ways, shadow transformation represents the bridge between personal growth and spiritual maturity. Earlier stages of development often focus on improving certain qualities or achieving particular outcomes. These goals are valuable, but they remain incomplete if the shadow continues operating unnoticed. True transformation occurs when awareness becomes spacious enough to include every aspect of the self, light, and shadow alike. As mind and heart unite through this process, a deeper sense of authenticity begins emerging. You no longer feel the need to perform a perfect version of yourself for the world. Instead, you move through life with a quiet honesty that acknowledges both strength and vulnerability. This authenticity becomes a powerful form of presence. People often sense it immediately because it carries a feeling of grounded sincerity. Over time, the shadow loses its identity as something dark or threatening. It becomes simply another dimension of the self that has been understood and integrated. The energy once trapped in conflict now flows freely as creativity, empathy, and resilience. The mind remains clear, the heart remains open, and awareness continues expanding. And in this union of mind and heart, something beautiful unfolds. The person you are becoming is no longer defined by the parts of yourself you tried to hide, nor by the ideals you once felt pressured to achieve. Instead, you become a living expression of integration, a consciousness that has learned how to transform shadow into wisdom and how to allow every part of the human experience to participate in the unfolding of a deeper wholeness. As the mind and heart begin to move together in harmony, as the shadow is no longer an enemy but a teacher integrated into awareness, another realization slowly begins to appear. You start to notice that life itself moves in rhythms. Nothing in existence remains static. Everything unfolds through cycles of growth and rest, expansion and contraction, clarity and mystery. At first, this movement can seem unpredictable, even chaotic, but the deeper your awareness becomes, the more you begin to recognize that these cycles are not random at all. They are part of a greater pattern of renewal that quietly sustains every level of life. Look closely at nature, and you will see this pattern everywhere. The seasons change continuously. Spring brings emergence and possibility. Summer brings growth and abundance. Autumn brings harvest and reflection. And winter invites stillness and renewal. The cycle does not end with winter. It begins again with spring. The same rhythm appears in the tides of the ocean, in the phases of the moon, and even in the beating of your own heart. Expansion and return, expression and rest, creation and integration. Human consciousness follows the same pattern, although many people resist it because they believe growth must always move in a straight line. When progress slows or life enters a quiet phase, the mind may interpret this as failure or stagnation, but in reality, these quieter periods often represent necessary stages of renewal, just as a field must rest after harvest to restore its fertility. Awareness sometimes needs stillness in order to integrate the insights gained during periods of intense transformation. Understanding cycles changes the way you interpret your own experiences. Instead of measuring progress only by visible results, you begin recognizing the deeper movement of growth taking place beneath the surface. A period of uncertainty may be preparing you for a new direction. A moment of reflection may allow deeper wisdom to emerge. Even apparent endings can become gateways to new beginnings when seen through the lens of cyclical renewal. This perspective also transforms how you approach manifestation and intention. Earlier, we explored the discipline of persistence and the importance of sustaining alignment with your vision. But persistence does not mean forcing life into constant productivity. True persistence includes the wisdom to recognize when action is required and when rest is necessary. It means staying faithful to your direction while allowing the natural rhythms of life to guide the pace of your journey. Within these rhythms, there exists a deeper principle that many spiritual traditions have attempted to describe: the idea that beneath the countless forms of existence, there is a unifying field connecting everything. Some call this field consciousness. Others describe it as universal intelligence, divine presence, or simply the underlying unity of life. Regardless of the language used, the essence of the idea remains the same. The universe is not merely a collection of separate objects interacting randomly. It is a living system in which every part participates in a greater whole. When awareness begins sensing this deeper unity, a new form of perception emerges. Instead of viewing yourself as an isolated individual struggling against external circumstances, you begin recognizing that you are part of the same creative field, shaping the world around you. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions are not separate from this field. They are expressions within it. In this context, the idea of a master frequency of oneness becomes a helpful metaphor for understanding how life remains interconnected. Think of a musical symphony. Dozens of instruments may be playing simultaneously, each producing its own sound. Yet beneath the diversity of tones, there is a shared rhythm and harmony guiding the entire composition. If one instrument falls out of alignment with the rhythm, the discord becomes noticeable. When each instrument returns to harmony, the music regains its coherence. In a similar way, consciousness expresses itself through countless individual experiences while remaining connected through a deeper frequency of unity. This master frequency is not something you must create. It already exists. What changes is your ability to perceive it. When the mind is filled with conflict, fear, or constant distraction, the subtle harmony underlying life becomes difficult to recognize. But as awareness grows quieter and more integrated, the sense of separation gradually softens. You begin feeling connected to the larger movement of life rather than isolated from it. This connection often reveals itself through moments of profound presence. Perhaps you notice it while watching a sunset, listening to music that moves you deeply, or sharing a meaningful conversation with another person. In those moments, the boundary between observer and experience seems to dissolve. You feel part of something larger than the individual self. These glimpses of unity offer a direct experience of the master frequency that quietly sustains existence. As this awareness deepens, it influences how you relate to both yourself and the world. Competition gives way to cooperation because you recognize that another person's growth does not diminish your own. Compassion becomes easier because you sense the shared humanity within every individual. Even challenges begin appearing differently. Instead of viewing them as punishments or obstacles imposed by an indifferent universe, you start seeing them as experiences participating in the ongoing evolution of consciousness. Cycles, renewal, and oneness therefore form a powerful framework for understanding the deeper rhythm of life. Each cycle offers an opportunity to learn, integrate, and begin again with greater wisdom. Renewal ensures that no moment of difficulty remains permanent, and the master frequency of oneness reminds you that every stage of the journey unfolds within a unified field of existence. When you live with this understanding, patience becomes easier. You no longer demand that life unfold according to rigid timelines because you trust the intelligence guiding its cycles. At the same time, you remain fully engaged with your intentions and actions because you know your choices participate in shaping the larger pattern. You are both an individual expression and a participant in something far greater. Over time, this perspective transforms the way you experience your own story. Life stops feeling like a series of disconnected events and begins resembling a living spiral of growth. Each cycle returns you to familiar themes, but with deeper awareness than before. Lessons repeat not to trap you, but to refine your understanding. The person you were in the past becomes the foundation for the person you are becoming. And within this spiral of renewal, you gradually begin sensing the quiet music of the master frequency guiding everything. It is the rhythm of unity beneath diversity, the harmony connecting every life to the greater whole. When you listen closely enough, you realize that this frequency has been present all along, moving through every cycle, sustaining every transformation, and inviting you again and again to remember that you are not separate from the vast intelligence unfolding through the universe itself. After you begin recognizing the cycles of life and sensing the deeper rhythm of unity beneath the surface of experience, another quiet practice becomes essential for continuing the journey with clarity. That practice is reflection. Reflection is the moment when movement pauses long enough for awareness to understand what it has already lived. Without reflection, experience accumulates, but wisdom does not always follow. Events pass quickly, lessons remain partially seen, and the mind rushes toward the next goal before fully absorbing what the present moment is offering. Reflection slows the rhythm of consciousness just enough for meaning to emerge. Most people live in a constant state of motion. They solve problems, pursue opportunities, respond to obligations, and move rapidly from one task to another. While this activity can be necessary, it also creates a subtle problem. When awareness never pauses, it begins reacting automatically instead of learning consciously. The mind collects information but rarely transforms that information into understanding. Reflection restores balance by creating space where experience can be examined with calm attention. Think about what happens when you finish reading a powerful book or listening to a meaningful piece of music. The experience itself is important, but the moments afterward when you sit quietly and allow the ideas or emotions to settle often reveal deeper insights. Reflection functions in a similar way within life itself. It is the quiet interval where the mind reviews its experiences and begins connecting them to a larger pattern of growth. These pauses of reflection can be described as sacred intervals. They are sacred not because they belong to any particular religion or ritual, but because they represent moments when awareness returns to its center. In these intervals, the constant pressure to produce, achieve, or prove something fades temporarily. Instead of striving, you begin listening. Instead of projecting expectations onto the future, you become curious about what the present moment is revealing. Sacred intervals appear naturally in life. Although many people overlook them, they may arise during early morning hours before the day begins, during a walk through nature, in the silence after a meaningful conversation, or in the calm that follows a difficult experience. These moments often arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, yet they carry a profound potential for clarity. When awareness enters them deliberately, They become opportunities to realign with the deeper direction of your journey. Reflection within these intervals allows you to see patterns that were previously hidden by activity. You may recognize how certain choices led to particular outcomes, or how emotional reactions shaped the way situations unfolded. Sometimes reflection reveals areas where growth is still needed. At other times, it reveals progress you had not previously acknowledged. Both insights are valuable because they help awareness refine its direction. Another important aspect of reflection is that it cultivates humility. As awareness reviews its experiences honestly, it begins realizing how much of life remains beyond complete control or understanding. You may see moments when plans unfolded differently than expected, yet those unexpected outcomes eventually led to valuable lessons or opportunities. You may recognize that guidance sometimes appeared through people, events, or ideas that you did not anticipate. This recognition softens the illusion that you must manage every detail of life through sheer effort alone. Humility in this context does not mean diminishing your own abilities or abandoning personal responsibility. Instead, it means acknowledging that the intelligence guiding life is larger than the individual perspective of the mind. When you accept this truth, a new form of openness becomes possible. Instead of assuming that every answer must come from your own reasoning, you become receptive to guidance emerging through unexpected channels. Guidance often appears in subtle ways. It may come as a quiet intuition, suggesting a new direction. It may appear through a conversation where someone offers a perspective that suddenly clarifies a long-standing question. Sometimes guidance arrives through circumstances themselves, gently redirecting your path when the one you had chosen no longer supports your growth. Reflection helps you recognize these signals because it creates the stillness necessary to notice them. In moments of reflection, you may ask yourself simple but powerful questions. What has life been teaching me recently? What patterns have been repeating in my experiences? Where have I been resisting lessons that are asking for my attention? These questions are not meant to judge your past actions, but to illuminate the wisdom contained within them. When awareness approaches reflection with curiosity rather than criticism, the answers often emerge naturally. Sacred intervals also renew the connection between intention and presence. Earlier, we explored the importance of vision, persistence, and discipline in shaping the direction of life. These qualities remain essential, yet they must occasionally be balanced with stillness. Without stillness, even meaningful goals can become sources of stress or distraction. Reflection reminds you why the journey began in the first place and whether your actions remain aligned with that deeper purpose. Another remarkable quality of reflection is that it transforms time itself. Moments that once felt rushed or insignificant begin revealing deeper meaning when examined through awareness. A challenge that seemed frustrating may reveal hidden strength you developed while overcoming it. A conversation that once appeared ordinary may reveal guidance that shaped an important decision later. Through reflection, the past becomes a living source of wisdom rather than a series of disconnected memories. Humility plays an essential role in this process because it keeps awareness receptive. When the mind believes it already understands everything, reflection becomes shallow. But when awareness remains humble, it recognizes that every experience carries layers of meaning waiting to be discovered. This humility invites life to continue teaching, guiding, and refining your perspective. Over time, reflection and sacred intervals create a rhythm within consciousness. Periods of action and creation are followed by moments of stillness and understanding. Each phase supports the other. Action generates experience, and reflection transforms that experience into wisdom. Together, they form a cycle that gradually deepens awareness and strengthens alignment with the larger intelligence guiding life. As this rhythm becomes natural, guidance begins appearing with greater clarity. You start noticing that certain ideas arrive during quiet moments, that certain solutions reveal themselves when the mind relaxes its constant effort. Instead of forcing answers, you allow them to emerge. Instead of demanding certainty, you trust that insight will appear when awareness is ready to receive it. In this way, reflection, sacred intervals, and humility form an essential foundation for the later stages of inner development. They remind you that growth is not only about effort but also about listening. They teach you that wisdom often arises in the spaces between actions rather than within them, And most importantly, they reveal that guidance is always available to those who cultivate the patience and openness required to receive it. There comes a stage in the journey of awareness when the world begins appearing slightly different than it once did. The events of daily life are no longer seen only as isolated occurrences. Instead, patterns begin revealing themselves in subtle ways. Certain numbers appear repeatedly. Particular passages in books seem to arrive exactly when they are needed. Moments of contrast experiences that feel opposite to what you desire suddenly carry unexpected clarity. Even something as simple as water begins to feel symbolic of a deeper memory flowing through life. When awareness becomes quiet enough, these elements start revealing a language that reality has been speaking all along. Let us begin with numbers. For thousands of years, human beings have sensed that numbers are more than tools for counting. Mathematics describes the architecture of the physical world with astonishing precision. The movement of planets, the rhythm of waves, the patterns within plants, and even the structure of atoms follow numerical relationships. Ancient thinkers noticed that numbers appear everywhere nature expresses order. Because of this, numbers gradually became symbols representing deeper patterns within reality. When you begin paying attention, you may notice that certain numbers appear repeatedly in your life. Sometimes this happens through coincidence, a time appearing on a clock, a number in an address, or a sequence encountered unexpectedly. At first, these moments may seem insignificant, yet when awareness becomes more attentive, you begin realizing that numbers often appear during periods when your mind is seeking direction or reflection, rather than assuming these occurrences carry mystical power by themselves. It may be more helpful to see them as reminders, small signals inviting awareness to pause and notice the present moment. Numbers function like markers within the stream of consciousness. They catch your attention because the mind recognizes patterns instinctively. When a pattern appears repeatedly, it interrupts the automatic flow of thought. In that brief pause, awareness becomes more alert. The number itself may not contain a secret message, but the pause it creates allows you to ask an important question. What is happening in my life right now that requires attention or reflection? This brings us to another powerful practice: sacred reading. Sacred reading does not necessarily mean studying religious texts, although it can include them. The essence of sacred reading lies in the way you approach words and ideas. Instead of rushing through information quickly, you read slowly and attentively, allowing certain phrases or passages to resonate within your awareness. Sometimes a single sentence can illuminate something that has been unclear for a long time. The meaning may not appear immediately. It may unfold gradually as you reflect on it throughout the day. This approach transforms reading from a purely intellectual activity into a dialogue between consciousness and insight. The words become mirrors, reflecting the questions already present within your mind. When awareness reads in this way, guidance often emerges naturally. A line that once seemed ordinary suddenly carries a deeper meaning because it meets the exact moment when you are ready to understand it. Contrast plays an important role in this process as well. Many people assume that contrast experiences that oppose what they desire is evidence that something is wrong. Yet contrast is one of the most powerful teachers within life. Without contrast, clarity cannot develop. Light becomes visible because darkness exists beside it. Warmth is appreciated because cold provides comparison. Joy becomes meaningful because sorrow reveals its absence. In the journey of manifestation and self-awareness, contrast functions as feedback. When a situation arises that feels uncomfortable or misaligned with your intentions, it reveals something important about your inner state or direction. Perhaps it highlights a belief that needs to be examined. Perhaps it reveals a boundary that needs strengthening. Sometimes contrast simply clarifies what you truly value by showing you what does not resonate with your deeper purpose. When awareness learns to view contrast as information rather than failure, frustration begins transforming into curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this experience showing me about the direction I want to move?" This shift turns even difficult moments into opportunities for refinement. The mind becomes less reactive and more observant, recognizing that clarity often emerges through the presence of opposing experiences. Now consider the symbolism of water. Water has fascinated philosophers, scientists, and spiritual teachers for centuries because it carries both physical and symbolic significance. Physically, water sustains life. The human body is largely composed of it. Oceans regulate the climate of the planet. Rivers shape landscapes over time. Yet water also behaves in ways that seem almost poetic. It flows around obstacles rather than fighting them. It changes form liquid, ice, vapor, while remaining fundamentally the same substance. Because of these qualities, water has often been used as a symbol for memory and consciousness. Think about how memories move within your own mind. They do not remain frozen in one place. They flow through awareness, sometimes appearing suddenly in response to a smell, a sound, or a familiar place. Just as water carries minerals and nutrients through rivers and oceans, memory carries meaning through the currents of experience. There is also a deeper metaphor here. Water adapts to every container it enters, yet it never loses its essential nature. In a similar way, consciousness expresses itself through many forms: thoughts, emotions, identities, experiences, while remaining part of a larger flow of awareness. When the mind becomes rigid, it resists this flow and creates tension. When awareness becomes flexible like water, it moves through life with greater ease. Some researchers have even explored the idea that water may respond subtly to environmental influences such as sound or vibration. Whether these effects are interpreted scientifically or symbolically, the idea reminds us of something important. The environment we create within our minds influences the quality of our experience. Just as water reflects the shape of its surroundings, consciousness reflects the emotional and mental patterns we cultivate. Numbers, sacred reading, contrast, and the memory of water therefore share a common theme. Each invites awareness to become more attentive to the patterns already present in life. Numbers interrupt automatic thinking and call attention to the present moment. Sacred reading opens a dialogue between wisdom and reflection. Contrast clarifies direction by revealing what does not align with your deeper intentions. Water reminds you that life flows continuously, carrying memory and possibility through every moment. When you begin observing these elements with curiosity rather than superstition, they become powerful companions on the path of awareness. They remind you that the universe is not silent. It communicates through patterns, experiences, and symbols that become visible when the mind slows down enough to notice them. Reality begins resembling a living text, constantly offering insights to those who learn how to read it with patience and presence. And as you continue moving through this unfolding dialogue with life, something quietly changes within your perception. The world no longer appears as a series of random events. Instead, it begins revealing subtle connections between inner awareness and outer experience. Numbers appear like punctuation marks within the story of your day. Words from a book arrive like gentle guidance at the exact moment you need them. Contrast sharpens your understanding of the path ahead. And, beneath it all, like a vast ocean beneath countless waves, the memory of life continues, flowing patiently, carrying wisdom through every moment of the journey. At a certain stage in the journey of awareness, something subtle yet unmistakable begins to change in the way you perceive reality. Earlier, life may have appeared as a series of disconnected events, things happening randomly, sometimes fortunate, sometimes difficult, rarely seeming to follow any meaningful pattern. But as your attention becomes more refined, silence, reflection, and inner coherence deepen. A different perspective begins to emerge. You begin sensing that life behaves less like a machine and more like a field of frequencies constantly interacting with one another. And once this perception begins developing, the world starts to resemble something like a hall of mirrors, where what appears around you often reflects what is active within you. To understand this idea, it helps to begin with the concept of frequency. In physics, frequency refers to the rate at which a vibration occurs. Everything in the physical world vibrates at some level, from the smallest particles to the largest structures in the universe. While human senses cannot perceive most of these vibrations directly, science continues, revealing how deeply vibration and resonance shape the structure of matter itself. In the realm of consciousness, the word frequency becomes a metaphor for the emotional and mental states you sustain over time. Consider how emotions influence your perception of the world. When you feel anxious or overwhelmed, your attention naturally gravitates towards signals of danger or uncertainty. Small challenges appear larger. Neutral expressions seem suspicious, and ordinary situations may feel threatening. The same environment, viewed through a different emotional state, can appear completely different. When you feel calm and confident, the mind recognizes opportunities more easily. Interactions feel smoother, and possibilities become visible where before there seemed to be only obstacles. This shift does not necessarily mean that the external world has changed. Instead, your internal frequency, the emotional and mental atmosphere within awareness, has altered the way you interpret and respond to your surroundings. Over time, these interpretations shape the choices you make and the actions you take, which then influence the experiences that follow. In this sense, your internal frequency acts like a tuning mechanism that influences how you interact with the wider field of life. But frequency alone does not determine the outcome of experience. Adaptability plays an equally important role. Life rarely unfolds in perfectly predictable ways. Even the most focused intention encounters unexpected circumstances. Adaptability is the ability to remain aligned with your deeper purpose while adjusting to changing conditions. It is the skill of flowing with life rather than resisting every shift that appears along the path. Imagine a musician performing with an orchestra. Each instrument contributes its own sound, yet the musician must constantly adjust to the rhythm and dynamics of the entire ensemble. If the tempo changes slightly, the musician adapts in real time. If another instrument introduces a variation, the musician responds with sensitivity rather than rigidity. In this way, the performance remains harmonious even though it is never identical from one moment to the next. Human consciousness functions in a similar way. When you remain too rigid in your expectations, life begins feeling like a series of frustrations because reality rarely conforms exactly to your plans. But when adaptability becomes part of your awareness, unexpected events become invitations to refine your direction rather than reasons to abandon it. Adaptability keeps the mind flexible while preserving the clarity of your deeper intentions. Now consider how these principles lead to the metaphor of the Hall of Mirrors. Imagine walking into a room where every wall is covered with mirrors. No matter where you turn, you see reflections of yourself multiplied in every direction. The reflections may distort slightly depending on the angle, but they always originate from the same source, the person standing in the center of the room. Life often behaves in a similar way. The people you encounter, the situations you repeatedly experience, and the emotional patterns that arise in your interactions frequently reflect aspects of your own internal state. This does not mean that you are responsible for every event that occurs, nor does it mean that the world exists solely as a projection of your mind. Instead, it means that your perception and response play a powerful role in shaping the experiences you recognize and reinforce. For example, if someone carries a deep belief that others cannot be trusted, they may unknowingly interpret neutral behavior as suspicious. Their guarded attitude influences how others respond to them, often creating the very distance they feared. Conversely, someone who approaches interactions with openness and respect often receives similar energy in return. The external responses reflect the internal posture with which they engage the world. This reflective dynamic is what makes the Hall of Mirrors such a powerful metaphor. Each experience becomes a mirror, offering information about the state of consciousness from which you are living. If conflict appears repeatedly in relationships, it may invite reflection on how communication or expectations are being expressed. If opportunities seem to appear frequently, it may reflect a mindset that remains open to possibility. The mirrors of life do not exist to judge you. They exist to reveal what awareness is currently projecting into the field of experience. Adaptability allows you to learn from these reflections rather than becoming trapped within them. When you notice a pattern repeating, you can ask a simple but transformative question. What aspect of my inner frequency might be participating in this pattern? This question shifts attention from blaming external circumstances to understanding the role of consciousness in shaping perception and response. Once awareness recognizes the pattern, it becomes possible to adjust the frequency through new beliefs, new emotional alignment, or new actions. As these adjustments occur, the reflections in the hall of mirrors begin changing as well. Situations that once triggered frustration may lose their intensity because your response has become calmer. Opportunities that once seemed invisible begin appearing because your attention has become more receptive. The mirrors continue reflecting, but the image they return evolves with your inner transformation. Over time, you begin recognizing that the hall of mirrors is not a trap but a classroom. Every reflection offers feedback about the frequency you are carrying into the world. The goal is not to control every mirror, but to understand the source standing at the center of the room, your own awareness. As you refine your inner state, the reflections naturally reorganize themselves, and eventually, a deeper insight appears. The mirrors themselves are not separate from the one who observes them. The reflections, the observer, and the field in which they appear are all part of the same living system of consciousness. When this realization settles into awareness, the hall of mirrors transforms from a confusing maze into a place of learning, adaptation, and quiet wonder, where every reflection becomes an invitation to know yourself more deeply within the vast field of life. As awareness deepens through reflection, adaptability, and the recognition that life often mirrors the frequencies within consciousness, another powerful principle quietly emerges in the journey of inner mastery. It is the principle of devotion. Devotion is a word many people associate with religion, rituals, or worship directed towards something outside themselves. Yet in its deepest sense, devotion is far broader and more intimate than that. Devotion is the sustained commitment of your attention, energy, and intention toward what you recognize as truly meaningful. It is the quiet decision to remain faithful to a deeper truth, even when circumstances attempt to distract or discourage you. Every human life is shaped by devotion in one form or another. Some people devote themselves to achievement, others to comfort, others to creativity, knowledge, relationships, or service. Devotion determines where attention flows, and attention determines how energy is invested over time. In this way, devotion becomes one of the hidden forces shaping the architecture of destiny. What you consistently give your attention to gradually becomes the structure around which your life organizes itself. Think about the way a river slowly carves its path through the landscape. At first, the flow of water may seem gentle and insignificant, yet over years and centuries it shapes valleys, channels, and entire ecosystems. Devotion operates in a similar way within consciousness. Small daily choices, what you focus on, what you believe in, what you nurture with patience, gradually carve the direction of your life. Destiny, therefore, is not merely a distant event waiting somewhere in the future. It is the cumulative result of the patterns you devote yourself to in the present moment. However, devotion alone cannot sustain the journey if the past remains filled with unresolved tension. This is where forgiveness becomes essential. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as an act of excusing harmful behavior or pretending that pain never occurred. In reality, forgiveness serves a different purpose. It frees awareness from being permanently anchored to past injuries. When resentment or regret remains unresolved, a portion of your attention continues, revisiting the same memory repeatedly. The emotional energy invested in that memory becomes trapped in a loop, limiting the creative potential available in the present. Forgiveness breaks that loop. It allows awareness to acknowledge the past without being controlled by it. This does not mean forgetting the lessons learned from difficult experiences. On the contrary, forgiveness preserves the wisdom gained, while releasing the emotional weight that keeps the mind tied to what cannot be changed. When you forgive, you are not necessarily declaring that what happened was acceptable. You are simply deciding that your future will not remain imprisoned by your past. The relationship between devotion and forgiveness becomes clear when you consider how attention shapes destiny. If attention is continually drawn back to resentment, disappointment, or regret, then the architecture of destiny begins forming around those emotional patterns. Life becomes organized around protecting old wounds rather than exploring new possibilities. But when forgiveness releases those attachments, attention becomes free to devote itself to something higher: growth, creativity, compassion, purpose. Forgiveness also transforms how you relate to others. Human relationships inevitably involve misunderstandings, mistakes, and moments when expectations are not fulfilled. Without forgiveness, these experiences accumulate like stones placed along the path of connection. Over time, the weight becomes too heavy for the relationship to continue moving forward. Forgiveness removes these stones, allowing connection to breathe again. It does not erase responsibility or accountability, but it prevents the heart from hardening around past disappointments. Another dimension of forgiveness involves how you relate to yourself. Many people carry quiet regrets about choices they wish they had made differently. The mind replays these memories repeatedly, imagining how life might have unfolded if certain decisions had changed. While reflection can offer valuable insight, excessive self-judgment traps awareness in the past. Self-forgiveness allows you to acknowledge that every decision was made with the understanding available at that time. Once the lesson has been learned, the mind can release the burden and move forward with greater wisdom. When devotion and forgiveness begin working together, they form the blueprint for what can be called the architecture of destiny. Devotion determines the direction of your energy. Forgiveness clears the emotional space necessary for that energy to flow freely. Together, they shape the internal environment from which your future emerges. Instead of being driven by unresolved conflicts or scattered attention, your life begins aligning around the values and intentions you choose consciously. This architecture does not appear instantly. Just as a building requires time to be designed, constructed, and refined, the structure of destiny develops gradually through repeated actions and decisions. Each moment of devotion adds another layer to the foundation. Each act of forgiveness clears away obstacles that might weaken the structure. Over time, the design becomes visible not only to you but also to those around you. People begin sensing the coherence in your choices and the steadiness in your character. One of the most remarkable aspects of this process is that destiny often reveals itself through service to something larger than personal gain. When devotion focuses solely on individual success, fulfillment can remain fragile because it depends heavily on external results. But when devotion includes contributing to the well-being of others or expressing creativity that enriches the world, the architecture of destiny becomes more resilient. Purpose extends beyond the boundaries of personal ambition and begins participating in a larger story. Forgiveness strengthens this purpose because it keeps the heart open. Without forgiveness, disappointment might cause you to withdraw from meaningful engagement. With forgiveness, you remain capable of offering your gifts, even when circumstances are imperfect. The journey becomes less about proving something to the world and more about expressing the deeper values guiding your life. As this architecture develops, you begin noticing that destiny is not merely something that happens to you, it is something you co-create through the alignment of devotion, intention, and emotional freedom. Each choice you make becomes a brick placed within the structure of your future. Each moment of awareness ensures that the structure remains aligned with the person you are becoming. And eventually, when you look back across the path you have traveled, you begin recognizing the quiet pattern that was forming all along. The moments of devotion gave your life direction. The acts of forgiveness kept your heart light enough to continue moving forward. Together they shaped the architecture of destiny, an unfolding design not imposed by fate, but built patiently through the choices of a conscious and evolving mind. There comes a stage in the journey of awareness when effort begins transforming into something quieter and more refined. Earlier stages required discipline, reflection, persistence, and courage to confront the shadow. You learned how to align intention, release resistance, cultivate forgiveness, and remain devoted to a deeper purpose. Yet as these qualities mature within you, a new kind of strength begins emerging, one that does not rely on force or urgency. It is a calm power. This power does not shout or rush. It moves steadily, with clarity and presence, guiding actions without the tension that once. Calm power is the strength that appears when the mind no longer needs to prove itself constantly. Many people confuse power with intensity, loud opinions, rapid movement, or relentless ambition. But true inner power often expresses itself through stillness. A person grounded in calm power can enter difficult situations without becoming overwhelmed because their center of awareness remains stable. They do not react impulsively to every emotional wave passing through their mind. Instead, they observe, understand, and respond with deliberate clarity. This stability opens the door to intuition. Intuition is one of the most misunderstood capacities of human consciousness. Some imagine it as something mystical or irrational, while others dismiss it entirely as imagination. Yet intuition can be understood simply as the mind's ability to perceive patterns and insights that arise before conscious reasoning has time to analyze them fully. It is the quiet signal emerging from the deeper layers of awareness where experience, memory, and perception converge. When the mind is constantly noisy, filled with fear, distraction, and internal debate, intuition becomes difficult to recognize. Its signals are subtle, often appearing as gentle impressions or quiet suggestions rather than loud declarations. Calm power creates the inner silence necessary for these signals to become noticeable. In moments of still awareness, an idea may arise that clarifies a situation instantly. A feeling may guide you toward a decision that later proves wise, even though the logic behind it was not immediately obvious. However, intuition becomes most reliable when it is balanced with humility and reflection. Not every impulse originates from intuitive wisdom. Sometimes emotions such as fear or desire can disguise themselves as intuition. This is why calm power remains essential. When awareness is grounded and patient, it can observe impulses carefully before acting on them. Over time, you begin learning the difference between reactive impulses and genuine intuitive insight. Another quality naturally emerging from calm power is the desire to serve. Service does not mean sacrificing your well-being or neglecting your own growth. Instead, it reflects the recognition that personal fulfillment deepens when your actions contribute positively to the lives of others. Earlier in your journey, much attention may have focused on personal transformation, healing wounds, clarifying intentions, and developing awareness. These stages were necessary because you cannot offer genuine guidance or support to others while your own foundation remains unstable. But as awareness stabilizes, a subtle shift occurs. You begin noticing that the wisdom gained through your experiences carries value beyond your own life. Perhaps your story encourages someone facing similar challenges. Perhaps your patience and presence create a space where others feel understood. Service often begins quietly in these simple interactions. It is not always a grand mission announced to the world. Often it appears as small acts of kindness, thoughtful words, or the willingness to listen deeply when another person needs understanding. Service also connects closely with the idea of sequence. Life unfolds in sequences rather than isolated events. Each step prepares the ground for the next. The lessons you encountered earlier in your journey created the awareness necessary for the insights you experience now. In the same way, the choices you make today influence the opportunities that will appear tomorrow. Recognizing this sequence changes how you approach the future. Instead of demanding immediate results, you begin trusting that each step has its place within a larger unfolding pattern. Sequence also teaches patience. When you plant a seed, it does not become a tree overnight. The seed must first develop roots beneath the soil before growth becomes visible above the surface. Similarly, many transformations occur within consciousness long before they appear in external circumstances. Calm power allows you to respect this sequence rather than forcing progress prematurely. Intuition often guides you toward the next step, but it rarely reveals the entire path at once. Trust grows as you learn that each step, taken with awareness, prepares the ground for the one that follows. All of these qualities, calm power, intuition, service, and respect for sequence, lead naturally into what can be called spiritual listening. Spiritual listening is the practice of becoming attentive to the deeper guidance flowing through life itself. It does not require withdrawing from the world or adopting complex rituals. Instead, it begins with a simple shift in awareness, learning to listen not only with the ears but with the whole presence of your being. Spiritual listening occurs when you approach life with openness rather than constant interpretation. In conversation, it means hearing another person fully instead of preparing your response while they speak. In moments of decision, it means allowing silence long enough for insight to arise before reacting immediately. In daily experience, it means noticing subtle signals, synchronicities, intuitive feelings, recurring themes that may reveal a deeper direction unfolding. When awareness practices spiritual listening, life itself begins feeling more like a dialogue than a struggle. You are no longer pushing against circumstances blindly. Instead, you engage with the unfolding process, responding to guidance as it appears. Sometimes that guidance encourages action. At other times, it invites patience, reflection, or compassion. The more consistently you listen, the more clearly the rhythm of life becomes recognizable. Spiritual listening also strengthens your connection to the master frequency of unity we explored earlier. As awareness becomes receptive, you begin sensing that guidance does not originate only from your own thoughts. It can emerge through the wisdom of others, through unexpected events, through intuition, or even through quiet moments in nature when clarity arrives without effort. Life becomes a living teacher, constantly offering insights to those willing to listen. Over time, the integration of calm power, intuition, service, sequence, and spiritual listening transforms the way you move through the world. Decisions become less frantic because you trust the guidance emerging from within and around you. Relationships deepen because your presence carries attentiveness rather than distraction. Purpose becomes clearer because your actions align with both inner wisdom and the needs of the world. In this stage of awareness, strength no longer feels heavy or aggressive. It feels steady and peaceful. You recognize that true power does not arise from controlling every outcome, but from aligning your awareness with the deeper intelligence moving through life. And as you continue listening patiently, humbly, and attentively, you begin discovering that the guidance you once searched for outside yourself has been quietly present all along, waiting for the moment when your awareness became calm enough to hear it. There comes a moment near the end of every inner journey when something surprising happens. Instead of feeling that you have arrived at a final destination, you begin realizing that the journey has quietly brought you back to where you started, but with completely different eyes. The questions that once felt confusing now appear as invitations to deeper understanding. The struggles that once seemed random now reveal themselves as steps within a larger pattern. This realization marks the beginning of what can be called spiral renewal, the moment when the path does not simply end, but circles back upon itself at a higher level of awareness. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Earlier we spoke about cycles, and now that idea becomes clearer. Growth does not move forward like a ladder where each step leaves the previous one behind forever. Instead, life often unfolds like a spiral. You encounter familiar themes again and again: relationships, choices, fears, hopes, questions about purpose. But each time you return to these themes with a deeper understanding than before. The situation may look similar, but your awareness has evolved. What once triggered confusion now invites reflection. What once created resistance now becomes an opportunity for compassion. Spiral renewal means that transformation does not erase your past. It integrates it. The earlier versions of yourself do not disappear. The person who once struggled, doubted, searched, and learned remains part of the structure of who you have become. When awareness recognizes this spiral movement, judgment softens. Instead of criticizing your past decisions, you begin appreciating how every stage contributed to your present clarity. Within this process, symbolic dreams often begin playing a subtle role. Throughout history, people have noticed that dreams sometimes contain images that feel deeply meaningful, even when their logic appears unusual. Dreams speak in symbols rather than direct explanations. A journey through a forest, a conversation with an unknown guide, the appearance of water, light, or an open doorway. These images often carry emotional or psychological messages that the conscious mind has not yet fully recognized. Symbolic dreams do not need to be interpreted with rigid formulas. Their value lies in the way they encourage reflection. When you wake from a dream that feels significant, it may simply be inviting you to ask what aspects of your life are currently transforming. Dreams sometimes bring hidden emotions to the surface or offer creative solutions that were not obvious during waking hours. In this way, they act like quiet messengers from the deeper layers of consciousness, reminding you that awareness continues working even when the mind rests. As spiral renewal continues, compassion becomes one of the most natural qualities to emerge. Earlier stages of growth may have focused heavily on personal development, healing wounds, strengthening awareness, learning to direct intention. These stages were necessary, yet they also revealed something important. Every person you encounter is navigating their own version of the same journey. Each individual carries hopes, fears, memories, and questions that shape their actions in ways not always visible on the surface. When you recognize this shared human experience, compassion arises naturally. Compassion is not pity or superiority. It is the understanding that every person is learning through their own cycles of growth and renewal. Instead of reacting harshly to mistakes or misunderstandings, you begin responding with patience and curiosity. You recognize that others are often struggling with challenges similar to those you once faced. Compassion also strengthens vision. Vision, as we explored earlier, is the ability to hold a clear image of what is possible before it becomes visible in reality. But when vision is combined with compassion, it expands beyond personal success. You begin imagining possibilities that benefit not only yourself, but also the wider community of people around you. Your goals begin including the well-being of others, the health of the environment, or the creation of opportunities that uplift those who walk the path beside you. This expanded vision naturally leads to the idea of return. Return does not mean going backward. It means bringing the wisdom gained through your journey back into the ordinary moments of life. Many people imagine spiritual or personal growth as something separate from everyday existence. They picture enlightenment as an escape from responsibility or complexity. But true growth reveals something different. The deeper your awareness becomes, the more fully you return to life, not to escape it, but to participate in it with clarity and purpose. Return means applying the insights you have gained to real relationships, real challenges, and real opportunities for service. It means speaking with kindness even when disagreement arises. It means listening deeply when someone needs understanding. It means approaching your work, your creativity, and your daily routines with the same awareness you cultivated through reflection and practice. The journey does not end in isolation. It completes itself through engagement with the world. And this brings us to the image of the completed circle. Imagine drawing a circle on a page. At first, it appears as a simple shape, but when you examine it closely, you realize that every point along the circle connects back to the beginning. The starting point and the ending point are the same location, yet the movement required to trace the circle allowed you to experience the entire path between them. Your inner journey often unfolds in a similar way. You began with questions about reality, attention, and the power of consciousness. You explored silence, gratitude, forgiveness, shadow transformation, and the rhythms of life. Along the way, you discovered intuition, service, reflection, and the unity connecting all existence. Now, as the circle closes, you realize that the awareness you were seeking was present from the very beginning. The journey did not create it, it revealed it. This realization does not mark the end of growth. Instead, it prepares you for the next spiral of development. Life will continue presenting new challenges, new dreams, and new opportunities for understanding. But now you approach those experiences with a deeper sense of trust. You know that each cycle of difficulty and renewal carries the potential for insight. You recognize that every moment of awareness contributes to the unfolding of a larger story. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this completed circle is the simplicity it reveals. After all, the exploration, reflection, and transformation, the essential truth becomes remarkably clear. Awareness itself, the quiet presence observing every thought, emotion, and experience remains constant throughout the entire journey. It was present when the questions first appeared, and it remains present now as understanding deepens. When you recognize this, the circle closes gently. The search relaxes. You realize that the wisdom you are seeking has always lived within the awareness through which you experience life. And from that realization, a new spiral begins, not driven by uncertainty, but guided by curiosity, compassion, and the quiet confidence that every step of the journey continues, leading you deeper into the living mystery of consciousness itself.